Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku. Back with another fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Was Forced to Betray You? Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Chapter 1. Don't try anything, hero. One wrong move and I'll make sure you regret it, whispered Shigaraki as he leaned over Izuku's shoulder. The villain's voice was low and menacing, sending a chill down Izuku's spine. The air around them felt thick and oppressive, and Izuku couldn't help but tremble. He hadn't expected this confrontation so early in his training at UA, but he knew he had to mask his fear. Eventually, the heroes will come looking for us, and when that happens, we need to finish our business, Shigaraki continued. Izuku Midoriya, an ordinary UA student training to become the world's greatest hero, found himself paralyzed with fear. He and the other students from Class 1A were on a field trip at the USJ when they were ambushed by the League of Villains. Unfortunately for Izuku, he had been captured and brought to this warehouse with Shigaraki and the other villains. He gulped, feeling Shigaraki's breath on the back of his neck, and fought to remain calm. He knew that staying cool-headed was essential, showing any sign of weakness could be used against him. But why did you bring me here? Izuku finally asked, his gaze fixed on Shigaraki's fingers near his throat. Shigaraki's smile widened. To have a little chat with you. But don't worry, once we're done, I'll send you right back to your friends. He tightened his grip slightly, careful not to let his fingers touch Izuku's skin, but the threat lingered in the air. He's going to send me back? No, I can't fall for that trick. He's clearly trying to trap me. Izuku thought, clenching his fists. His hero costume was torn, and he had a cut on his left cheek, adrenaline still coursing through him from the attack at the USJ. After what felt like an eternity, Shigaraki spoke again. I know your secret. Izuku gasped and turned his head to get a better look at Shigaraki's expression, which was calm yet unsettling. What are you talking about? He stammered, trying to hide his fear. I know you're All Might's successor. I know everything about you too, so don't even think about denying it. Shigaraki spat, his voice dripping with malice. Don't try to play games with me, it won't work. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Shigaraki's labored breathing. After a moment, Shigaraki continued. I'm going to expose this information to the public. Imagine how much the media would love it. All Might's powers revealed. It would spread like wildfire. But it wouldn't just be the public who would know, villains everywhere would learn his secret and how it's passed on. That would create chaos, wouldn't you agree, Midoriya? His smile grew wider, eyes gleaming with a twisted excitement. Izuku realized that Shigaraki was serious about every word. What do you want from me then? Izuku asked quietly. I won't tell anyone on one condition, Shigaraki replied, his tone shifting to one of seriousness. Master Tomura, we don't have much time left, Kurojirai interjected. If our plan is to succeed, we must hurry. I know. Just be quiet for a moment. I'm almost done, Shigaraki snapped before turning back to Izuku. I want you to go back to UA, act as if we never had this conversation, and spy on the UA teachers for me. My master has informed me that Principal Nizu possesses something important, and I want you to retrieve it. You want me to betray you? Izuku exclaimed, horrified. Either that, or I expose All Might's secret that he's worked so hard to keep hidden, Shigaraki stated coldly. Izuku's stomach twisted. How could he go back and betray everyone who trusted him? But if he didn't, he would ruin All Might's career as a hero. What choice did he have? Alright, I'll do it. But you have to promise to keep your side of the bargain. If I spy on you, you have to stay quiet about One for All. Izuku held his breath, waiting for the villain's response. Yeah, sure. I always keep my promises, so you have nothing to worry about, hero. Just don't blow your cover and we'll have a deal. Shigaraki extended his hand for a handshake, but Izuku merely stared at him, expressionless. Shigaraki laughed. Don't worry, we don't have to shake on it. But he pulled Izuku closer, his voice low and threatening. If you even think about trying anything, don't think I won't act on One for All. The chill in his breath sent shivers down Izuku's spine, and the green-haired hero nodded in agreement. See you around then, hero. Before leaving, Shigaraki placed a small device in Izuku's hand that resembled a walkie-talkie. Keep that with you at all times so we can communicate and meet up when needed. And just like that, IzukuXTomura vanished into a black portal with Kurogyri, leaving the UA student alone in the warehouse, filled with shame and fear. Mr. Midoriya, may I ask what led to your abduction by the villains in the first place? What exactly did they want from you, and how did you manage to escape? Izuku remained silent, keeping his head down as Police Chief Kenji Tsuragami escorted him into the police headquarters. Once seated, Tsuragami cleared his throat and began to inquire about the incident. Midoriya, I understand this must have been quite distressing, especially since you haven't been at UA for long, and the sudden attack was unexpected. However, I need to ask you some questions about what happened, he said gently. Izuku sat still, listening to the officer's questions and answering as honestly as he could, though he occasionally twisted the truth. Can you tell me if the villains who took you said anything? What was their reason for abducting you and then letting you go? Tsuragami asked seriously. I don't know. They didn't say. I think it was because I wasn't the person they were looking for. They must have mistaken me for someone else, Izuku replied, concealing the truth. They continued the questioning for a while before Izuku was finally told he could go home. Yet, even in the safety of his mother's car as she drove him back, Izuku could still feel the chilling grip of Shigaraki's fingers around his neck, his heated breath, and the sinister words echoing in his mind. See you around, hero. A few weeks later, a soft sigh escaped Izuku Midoriya's lips as he watched Mr. Aizawa explain something on the blackboard. Izuku had been attending his regular classes like normal for a while now, but occasionally, the deal he had made with Shigaraki crossed his mind. He felt the walkie-talkie in his jacket pocket. Carrying it around at school made him uneasy, but he worried about what would happen if his mom found it while cleaning his room. He figured it was best to keep it close in case Shigaraki reached out. Strangely, though, no one had contacted him, and he hadn't heard from Shigaraki or the other villains since the day of his kidnapping. Maybe if I'm lucky, this thing is broken, or maybe they changed their minds about me, Izuku thought to himself. Midoriya, are you paying attention? Aizawa's monotonous voice broke through his thoughts. The teacher was looking at him with a hint of displeasure. Why, sir? Izuku quickly replied. Aizawa recognized that Izuku's mind was elsewhere but chose not to press the issue, allowing him to sort out his own problems. Izuku gripped his pencil, trying to refocus on his schoolwork instead of his worries. He still had no idea what he was supposed to be searching for, no information on what Shigaraki wanted, which would have been helpful considering the stakes involved. His and All Might's secret was on the line after all. Shaking his head to clear his thoughts, Izuku returned to answering the questions on his page. After school let out, the little green-headed boy was heading out of the school's gates when he heard someone call for him. Midoriya. Izuku turned to see Tenya Ida approaching. Hi Ida. What is it? Ida quickly explained, Midoriya, I've noticed your grades slipping a bit. I was worried that maybe you're not studying as much as a UA student should. Izuku exhaled lightly. Well, that's not exactly it. It's kind of complicated, he admitted. I see. Well, it's none of my business in your personal life, but as a classmate, I would be more than happy to offer some of my spare notes since you've been falling asleep in class lately, he stated. Oh, really? I would really appreciate that. Thanks, Ida, Izuku said gratefully. Ida nodded. I keep my spare notes in my desk back in class. Feel free to use them as you need, he said before leaving. Izuku found the notes just as Ida explained they would be. By the time he walked out of school, it was already getting dark, and something caught his eye. A tall, shadowy figure stood in an alley across from Izuku. They wore a black hood, making it hard to see any facial details, but Izuku could immediately tell they were watching him. Just then, the walkie-talkie in Izuku's pocket began to vibrate quietly. He picked it up, but as he placed it to his ear, the figure did the same. For a few moments, all Izuku could do was stare at the stranger as he heard breathing on the other end of the walkie-talkie, until someone spoke. Izuku Midoriya. I'm glad to see you have your communicator with you, said a whispered voice. Izuku's eyes widened. "As Shigaraki?" he blurted out without realizing it. Shigaraki smiled from beneath the shadow of his hood. "That's right. It's a good thing you haven't forgotten me, because I haven't forgotten about you, hero." I didn't expect you," Izuku muttered, but Shigaraki heard. "Well, something came up, and I haven't had a chance to talk to you, but don't worry, I have a little errand for you." "What type of errand?" Izuku listened nervously as the villain spoke. "There's somewhere I want you to go with me. You'll be under my supervision while we're on this task, so don't mess it up." "Got it?" he growled. "You understood." Izuku felt his heart race. He hadn't mentally prepared himself for this helping this supervillain, but it wasn't like he had another option. "Meet me at the park nearby tonight at 10 sharp. I'll be waiting, so don't be late." He hung up quickly after that. Izuku sighed and pulled out his phone to check his GPS. The park Shigaraki wanted to meet at was actually pretty close by, just as he said. In fact, it was the one Izuku used to play at when he was a kid. "I'll have to tell Mom I'm not going to be home until late tonight," he thought as he texted his mom an excuse for being late for dinner and not to worry. He was only meeting up with Tomura Shigaraki after all. What could go wrong? By the time Izuku arrived at the park, it was completely dark. The air had grown colder, and the UA student pulled his school jacket tighter to keep warm. "Just get this over with, and you can go home," Izuku told himself. The park was deserted, no people, just dark and quiet. Everything seemed abandoned. Even the swing set made no sounds in the still air. Not wanting to stand around in a children's park at night, Izuku chose to sit on a bench a little ways off. While waiting, he pulled out his communicator and examined it closely. "I don't see a way to contact him. How is this a communicator if it doesn't let me communicate with whoever is on the other side?" Izuku mumbled, annoyed. He turned his head when he heard the sound of crunching leaves. There was Shigaraki, wearing his black hood from earlier. He looked serious, and being this close sent a chill through Izuku. "Shigaraki." Izuku acknowledged the villain's presence. "Brat," was his only response, and he didn't speak again for a few moments. "Follow me," Shigaraki gestured with his head, and Izuku obeyed. Shigaraki led Izuku out of the park and down the city's sidewalk in complete silence. At first, Izuku didn't mind, but after a while, it made him anxious. Shigaraki's POV. "Why is this kid being so quiet?" thought to myself. "Is he really that scared of me that he won't even question where I'm taking him? TSK, pathetic." "Hey Brat," I stopped and looked at Midoriya. "Why are you being so quiet?" He stopped and looked around nervously, avoiding eye contact. "Well," he started but then stopped. "Well, what is it?" I was getting irritated. Why was he acting like this? I want to know where we're going." Midoriya muttered, kicking the ground awkwardly. "There's someone I want you to meet, but we need to find him first." I pulled out my phone, carefully holding it with 2 fingers and using another to tap the screen. "We believe he's being held hostage here, but if our information is correct, you'll probably have to deal with whatever thugs are holding him." I looked Midoriya dead in the eye. "If necessary, handle them. Got it?" "I can't hurt anyone," Midoriya shouted back at me. Grabbing Midoriya by the collar of his shirt, I pulled his face close to mine. "Listen here, hero. I don't care what you think, say, or feel. I'm the one in charge here, understand? You don't seem to grasp your position, but let me remind you. You're Izuku Midoriya, a UA student, but also working undercover for the League of Villains. Which means you're working for me." I panted angrily. How dare this kid act like he was better than me? "If you don't listen, then I have no use for you," I whispered in his ear. After a moment, Midoriya nodded, and I let go and turned my back to him. "Now, shall we continue? And no more complaints," I warned. Midoriya's POV. I decided not to ask any more questions. I didn't want to upset Shigaraki again. Honestly, when he was angry, I could almost feel his icy fingers tightening around my neck, whispering in my ear how fragile my life was and how he could make me do terrible things. I shuddered. I won't harm anyone. I could never take another's life even if it meant facing Shigaraki's wrath. I will never sink to the level of a villain. Gripping my fist close to my chest, I vowed in my heart that I would never be like Shigaraki. I'd never be like a villain. The two individuals continued their walk in strange silence. Shigaraki didn't care if Izuku wanted to talk. Why would he care anyway? The villain led Izuku to a small dock that seemed overdue for maintenance, but across from them was a shack that looked just as filthy and damaged as the dock beside it. Yellow lights flickered from the shack's windows, indicating that the building was occupied. That's the place, Shigaraki told Izuku quietly. Your job is to go in there and get the hostage. Don't make a big deal about it either. I don't really care about him. I'm only doing what was instructed by my master, so hurry and go. Wait me. You're not even going to help. Izuku's jaw dropped. Shigaraki was blackmailing him into doing his dirty work, yet he wouldn't even assist Izuku? This should be easy for someone like you. Besides, think of it as more of a test to show you're really serious about being one of us, Shigaraki explained. Izuku turned towards the shack and tried to see if he could spot anyone through the window, but he couldn't. The windows were dirty, and he couldn't even make out how big the room looked from the outside. I'll need to move closer. Do you know how many people are in there besides the hostage? Izuku asked Shigaraki. I would say about 2 or 3, he answered. Really? I thought there'd be more. Izuku mumbled in surprise. Just hurry up and do your job, Shigaraki snapped. Izuku nodded and slowly and carefully made his way towards the shack. Ducking under a window, Izuku pressed his ear against the windowsill and tried to listen to any conversation. I told you what I wanted. Either you obey my order, or I'll show you what happens to those who think they know better than me. What's it going to be, kid? A voice snarled inside the room. They sounded older than Izuku and likely more dangerous than Shigaraki. Suddenly, Izuku heard the sound of a weapon being loaded, and his heart froze. Either you tell me where it is, the voice told the hostage, or you'll regret it. Tell me where it is or you'll regret it, shouted the man inside. Moving before thinking, Izuku smashed the nearby window and looked at the sight before him. The main room was cluttered. Pieces of metal and tools lay scattered around, and in the center were 3 men surrounding a smaller figure tied to a wooden chair. The hostage was bound so tightly with rope and duct tape that Izuku couldn't even get a good look at them, much less know if they were even breathing. One of the men wore a yellow and black tux, his greasy black hair combed back, while the other 2 wore black jumpsuits and ski masks. What the heck? One of the goons jumped back, startled. Is that a UA kid? Izuku flinched. He had been careless enough to reveal that he was a UA student, and if authorities took in the hostage takers, he could get in serious trouble if questioned about why he was there or what was happening. The blame was on him this time. No time to worry about that now, I have to save the hostage. Izuku got into a battle stance and prepared for his next move. Who cares? Shouted what Izuku assumed was the boss of the group. Just take him out. The first goon lunged for a punch at Izuku while the other attempted to flank him from behind. Izuku quickly ducked from the flank and kicked the guy in front of him down to his knees, but the one behind him activated a fiery quirk. When Izuku glanced back, he saw flames spreading from the man's fingertips, igniting the room and melting the rotten wood floors. You idiots, growled the boss, and without wasting another moment his right arm swelled with muscle, and he grabbed the mummified-looking hostage and dashed for the nearest exit. He's trying to escape with the hostage. Izuku jumped away from the 2 goons and leaped towards the boss, but one of the men unleashed a wind quirk, pushing Izuku away from saving the hostage and throwing him against the wall. The goon quickly seized the opportunity and hurled Izuku across the room, crashing him hard against the opposite wall. Ugh! Izuku's back felt almost numb. He tried to get up, but his limbs ached with pain and he could hardly move. One of the goons kicked at Izuku's face before he could react. I can't seem to focus. Everything that's been going on in my mind these last few weeks has kept me stressed and unable to think straight. Another kick landed on Izuku. Because of my weakness. I got into this mess. Shigaraki's POV. A slow grin spread across my face as I watched Midoriya stand up. I wasn't happy, I was relieved I hadn't wasted my time. When Midoriya turned towards me, I regained my usual unamused expression. So, you're finally done with your temper tantrum? Good, then we need to. I was abruptly interrupted by a familiar voice. Hey, Shigaraki. We got him. I noticed Twice and Mr. Compress standing by the entrance Midoriya had made earlier. Twice glanced around the shack. "Whoa, what happened here?" one side of him exclaimed. "It looks like one of the hostage holders had a fire quirk." "What went down, Shigaraki?" asked the other. "Shut up," I spat. This guy was too annoying with his two personalities. I looked over at Compress. "What did you two get?" "We have retrieved our hostage friend," he said, holding up his marble. "The hostage holder has been dealt with, and we are ready to return to base. He's not going to be happy when he finds out his workshop was destroyed, though," Twice mumbled. "Come on. We're leaving," I stated, walking out of the melted and crumbling shack. "Hey," said someone behind me. When I turned, Midoriya was standing across from me. "What is it?" I grumbled. "I think you should check on your friend's injuries. He had some cuts on his arms, and I'm guessing his captors were trying to get information from him. They were talking to him like he had something they wanted," he explained, looking a bit embarrassed. "I thought someone should know so they can check up on him." "Yeah, whatever. Anyway, you can leave now." "See you soon, hero," I said before heading out, with Compress and Twice trailing behind me. Izuku's POV. I watched as Shigaraki left with the other villains, but I didn't leave until they were out of sight. I sighed. "I should go before that guy wakes up," I muttered, glancing at the man I had knocked unconscious. Leaving the scene as quickly as possible, I started my original route back home. I texted my mom that I was on my way back and enjoyed the simple sounds of the city at night as I traveled home. Chapter 5. "I'm going to be late," Izuku exclaimed as he ran past his mom and out the front door, not bothering to waste time on breakfast and focusing instead on getting to his early morning classes with Aizawa. Last night's adventure took a toll on me. I need to remind Shigaraki I'm not interested in helping on school nights from now on. Izuku waited nervously at the crosswalk for the signal to walk, but someone tapped him on the shoulder with a firm poke. "Huh." Izuku turned but didn't see anyone at first until he noticed a small child standing right in front of his knees. The boy wore a faded red hoodie with yellow stripes, black pants, brown shoes, and soft blonde hair that looked like it had never met a comb. "Can I help you?" Izuku asked kindly. The child, no older than 11, grabbed Izuku's hand and started dragging him away from the crosswalk and in the opposite direction he needed to go. "Hey, where are you taking me?" "I'm in a rush, so could you show me later whatever it is?" Izuku said nervously. He wasn't used to kids and often found himself trying to please them. "Well, I have to go to school and I can't." Izuku stopped when he noticed something on the boy's arm. It was a mark that wrapped halfway around his hand, bright red and fresh. "Your arm. Are you okay?" Izuku asked, but the boy had already stopped dragging him, and they were now standing in front of a dark alley. Looking at Izuku with a toothy smile, the little boy ran into the alley. "Wait. Where are you going?" Izuku hesitated about following the boy. It seemed strange for the kid to bring him here, but if he didn't act, he would be late for class and lose the boy. He had to choose. I can't just let him run off with those marks. He could be in danger. So Izuku followed after the boy but quickly realized he was nowhere near as fast as the child. "He's pretty quick, but where is he leading me?" Izuku gasped, stopping when the boy halted about 10 feet ahead of him. "Your name is Izuku Midoriya, correct?" The boy's tone was serious, and his words were sharper. "Why, yes." Izuku answered cautiously. Taking a slow, firm step towards Izuku, the child moved closer. Izuku took a step back, trying to think of a way to keep his distance when, "Oh my God, thank you, you're my hero," the boy wailed, jumping and latching onto Izuku's thighs, rubbing his tear-streaked face against Izuku's UA uniform, causing him to drop his school bag in surprise. At the Izuku stiffened in alarm. If he hadn't been paying attention, he might have thought the kid was about to attack him, but no, this little boy was just using him as a human tissue. "I thought I was going to die last night." "Thank you so much," the boy sobbed. "Last night?" The boy nodded, gripping onto Izuku for dear life. "Wait, so you were the hostage?" Izuku exclaimed. You're part of the League," he whispered, the last part almost a shout. This little kid, barely able to hold himself together, was working with Shigaraki? A villain? That idea seemed so absurd that Izuku could hardly believe it. Once the realization sunk in, Izuku pulled the child off and crouched to speak to him face to face. "You're working with Tomura Shigaraki?" The boy wiped his eyes. "Yeah." Izuku thought deeply for a moment, then put on a more tired-looking smile. "What's your name?" he asked kindly. "Sniff you Yukimai." "What's your quirk?" After a moment of awkward silence, Yu answered, "I don't have one." Izuku's eyes widened. "You don't have a quirk?" "No." Yu blushed from embarrassment, which caught Izuku's attention. I didn't mean it like that. I was just surprised that Tomura wanted me to save someone without a quirk. That's not what I meant. It's fine that you don't have a quirk. I didn't used to, Izuku trailed off, staring down sheepishly. Yu laughed a bit at Izuku's awkwardness, and Izuku sighed in relief. At least he didn't upset him. "How did you get captured?" Izuku asked Yu. I was walking back from running an errand Tomura had me do one night when these 3 enormous men grabbed me. After that, I fell asleep and woke up all tied up. They kept asking me questions about something, but I couldn't answer because that would upset Tomura, and I didn't want to make him mad. So instead, I pretended I didn't know. They also hurt my arm when they got frustrated with me," Yu added. Izuku listened to Yu's story and then asked, "What did they want from you?" "I'm making something for the other villains and they wanted it," Yu replied. "Weapons? How did they know you were making weapons for the League?" Izuku asked, confused and shocked that this kid, who could barely reach his chest, was involved in something as dangerous as creating weapons for Shigaraki and the others. Yu kicked the ground with his sneaker. "How should I know? I don't really care anyway. I got saved in the end, just like I knew I would," he said, seeming unreasonably calm. If any other child had gone through such trauma, they wouldn't be like this. But if this kid was important enough to Shigaraki, maybe there was more to Yu than met the eye. The two stood in silence before Izuku suddenly jumped up straight. "What's wrong?" Yu asked. "I have to go to school. I'm late." "Oh my gosh, I gotta go, Yu," Izuku exclaimed as he grabbed his bag off the ground and hurried away from the alley toward Yu. "I'm sorry I have to leave like this." Izuku called over his shoulder. "Hey, Midoriya," Yu called, running up to him. "Will you be busy after school?" Izuku, jumping from one foot to the other in his anxiety, answered, "I don't think so. Meet me at the coffee shop on Shigamine Street, okay?" Yu's eyes lit up, clearly hoping Izuku would agree. Izuku nodded. "Sure." He said goodbye until later that evening and quickly sped away. Chapter 6. Midoriya. The green-eyed boy turned around to see Ida walking straight toward him. Izuku waved and watched as his friend made his way over. "Did you find my notes?" Ida asked seriously. Izuku nodded. "Michim. Thanks a lot, Ida. Really, I haven't been myself lately, and the notes really helped me catch up," he said gratefully. Ida smiled. "That's good. Seeing how you've been these last few weeks had us all worried, Midoriya. I'm glad you seem to be making a steady recovery." It was true that the students in Class 1A knew about Izuku's struggles in school after the USJ attack. Even Bakugo seemed to give Izuku his space and kept the insults to a minimum. So Ida and Izuku's other friends tried to be helpful in any way they could. Denki would invite Izuku to parties with Shiro and Kirishima. Ochiko offered to bring lunch for him if he wanted, Todoroki asked if he wanted to train with him, and the others tried to help in their own ways. And Izuku did appreciate all their efforts. "Let's walk to class together," Izuku offered, and Ida happily accepted. "I need to become stronger again, more than before." "Get up and fight then. Are you foolish enough to let those guys push you around like that?" A whispered, angry voice came from behind the two men. When they turned, they saw Shigaraki, still wearing his black hood. In the flickering light from the burning shack around them, Izuku got his first clear look at Shigaraki's face that night. "Get up. I didn't bring you all this way to let you become their punching bag, did I? Get up and fight," he hissed. Both of Izuku's tormentors stood frozen in horror. Was that Tomura Shigaraki? They had heard of him from the underground, but seeing him here with such a sinister expression made them freeze in shock and fear. "Why you work for the League of Villains?" gasped the one with the air quirk. Work? I'm the leader, you fool. Shigaraki snapped, grabbing him by the neck. The man quickly disintegrated into dust. Watching his friend's fate unfold at Shigaraki's hands, the other goon fell to his knees and pleaded, "Please, I've never done anything to you." But Shigaraki didn't respond. Instead, he turned to Izuku, who was painfully thrown against the cracked wall. Shigaraki's POV. Watching how easily Midoriya was beaten really irritated me. I let him live. I chose him to work for the league, and these are the results. Crumpled like a piece of paper and tossed against the wall, even allowing the hostage to be taken away. I didn't even know why I decided to let him live. He seemed completely worthless. Are these the kind of results I deserve? I asked Midoriya seriously. I wasn't going to play around anymore. This time, I wasn't happy. If you can't fight back, then what kind of hero are you? Midoriya's eyes widened in shock, which I guessed was normal since I'm not usually the type to lecture. If you can't fight, then you're neither a hero nor a villain, just plain useless. I'd earn my back. If you become this weak because of one villain's hold on you, how do you expect to ever become free? If this is all you've got, hero, then don't ever think you have a chance against me. Izuku's POV. Holding onto my knee for balance, I stood on my wobbly and aching legs. I can't ever beat Shigaraki if I accept defeat this easily. I took my previous battle stance. Letting one for all surge through my veins, I pulled back my fist. I'm still a hero, no matter what. I won't let Shigaraki change that. I'm still a hero. I screamed. Detroit smash. I shouted, sending the last of the henchmen crashing through the wall and out of the shack. I'll beat Shigaraki. I'll overcome the hold he has over me. And I'll defeat the league. Hey Midoriya. Siro waved. How are you doing, man? Asked Kirishima. As soon as Izuku walked into the classroom with Ida, everyone immediately noticed his new smile, and his eyes seemed a bit brighter. The sight was a relief to everyone. Todoroki's eyes widened when he saw Izuku. The greenette looked much better, no dark circles under his eyes, no forced tired smile, and his previously heavy aura seemed to have lifted. Todoroki's POV. It felt like an eternity since I had seen Midoriya smile. He seemed much better than the last time I saw him, and even though I didn't know the reason, I was just relieved to see him happy again. I exhaled softly, and my muscles relaxed for the first time in weeks. How are you feeling, Midoriya? I asked gently, but unfortunately, all the other students crowded around him with questions and attention, so he didn't hear me. I watched from my desk as Midoriya thanked the others for their concern. He truly was selfless when it came to others, always putting them first. Even though I had never told him, I genuinely believed Izuku Midoriya would become one of the greatest heroes because of his heart. I felt a warmth and a strange flutter after thinking of Izuku, and quickly pulled out my textbook, redirecting my thoughts to algebra. Normal POV. Alright class, sit down and pay attention, Mr. Aizawa said with a sigh. Today we're going to be talking about your hero names. He was interrupted by sudden cheers from the students. Hero names? This was the best part of training to become heroes, choosing your very own hero name. Aizawa watched tiredly as the students in his class chatted excitedly about what names they wanted. Knowing they wouldn't settle down anytime soon, he pulled out his sleeping bag and said, "Today, another teacher will be helping and approving your hero names. I don't really care what you choose, just be quick about it and keep the noise down while I sleep." With that, he rolled up in his yellow sleeping sack and fell into a deep snooze. "Oh yeah, this is the reason I wanted to be a hero," shouted Kaminari. "I'm not sure that's a good thing," Izuku said, scratching his head. "Hey, who do you think will be helping us choose our names anyway?" Kirishima wondered aloud. Before anyone could answer, the door swung open, and in walked the R-rated hero herself, Midnight. Immediately, the males in the room turned red, their attention snapping toward the pro-hero. It's Midnight?" Siro exclaimed. "Calm down, boys," Midnight warned. "I'm here to help you pick a marvelous and memorable name that you'll be known by for the rest of your life. Remember this, students, even if you choose your dream name, that doesn't mean society or the media will call you that. You might end up with something you dislike, so choose wisely." walked to the front of the classroom. One by one, everyone went up in front of their classmates to present their chosen names for Midnight's approval. Some might have been tempted to pick names that blurred the line between hero and villain. Lord Explosion Murder, announced a confident Bakugo. Sheesh, sounds like Bakugo has never picked a hero name before, Mina muttered. Bakugo, we're choosing hero names, called out Kirishima. I know that, weird hair, so shut it. Bakugo growled. That name sounds too scary for a hero, Midnight said dramatically. Change it, she ordered. What? Fine, whatever. Bakugo stomped off, and when he returned, he had only chosen another intimidating name, so he didn't get his hero name registered that day. But Izuku had something in mind. Izuku mentally panicked as he made his way to the front of the room. I chose my hero name, he said quietly. All right, let's hear it then, replied Midnight, gesturing for Izuku to speak. Breathing deeply and slowly, Izuku revealed his dry erase board. At first, everyone was shocked, but then Izuku began to explain himself. I know this doesn't seem like the most usual hero name, but I want to make it one. He started to gain confidence in his voice. I don't think it matters what you're called or how you look on the outside, because it's the inside that reflects your true heart. Whether I'm seen as silly for this being my hero name, at least I'll know I'm a hero at heart. Izuku said his words perfectly, but when he finished, his face turned pink from embarrassment. So, I want to be known as Deku, Izuku concluded with a smile. Darn it, why did you have to go bother that kid in the middle of the day? Shigaraki smacked the boy lightly on the head. Didn't I teach you better than to wander off like that? Are you foolish? I'm sorry, Tomura-kun. You whimpered, rubbing his head. I just wanted to thank him for saving me. I don't care. We had to rescue you before because you didn't listen. Remember this, I only came back for you because you're useful to us. So don't go messing around, got it? Shigaraki turned his back to the kid and sat grumpily at the large bar. Don't be so down, Master Shigaraki. We'll see the young UA student soon, I'm sure. Kurogyari tried to reassure him politely, but Shigaraki just slammed a glass onto the floor and replied coldly. I couldn't care less about that useless UA kid, Kurogyari. Kurogyari sighed mentally. Of course, sir. Fine. I'll explain it again. Tomura-kun said he wants to see you again today. You sighed. Come on, Izuku-kun, he's not that scary. Easy for you to say. He doesn't threaten to erase your existence. Izuku mumbled quietly. Besides, what happened to you wanting to hang out after school? Well, the place I wanted to go is where Tomura-kun wants to meet up, so it's a win-win. Izuku had been standing outside the school's gate for almost 2 hours, first waiting for you to meet up with him. He was not expecting the news the little boy brought. Shigaraki wanted to meet with him again. Izuku had hardly recovered from their recent nighttime adventure, and he surely didn't want to go back too soon to talk with Shigaraki. Maybe he had failed the other night, and now Shigaraki was getting rid of him since he no longer saw him as useful. Izuku shuddered. He's not mad about the other night, is he? He asked you. You tilted his head with a confused expression. Why would he be mad? He was totally happy that you saved me. I never knew he would ever punch me while smiling. Oh dear. I probably should meet up with him another time. I have tons of schoolwork and he told me to tell you if you didn't come, he was going to make you regret it, you stated simply, and Izuku froze in the middle of his rambling. You giggled a bit. But you have nothing to worry about, Izuku-kun. I'm sure everything will be fine. Just listen to the boss because they always know what's best, he chirped, but Izuku only stared at him for a moment. Those are terrible rules to live by, he thought. But in the end, Izuku was dragged by you to a cafe he had never seen before, located in one of the most abandoned parts of town, where there were barely any people around. What type of cafe is this, you? Izuku asked curiously. The building looked old, but the front seemed recently redone. The storefront windows and door were repainted, along with a few potted plants in front to add some color to the dreary and plain building. Honestly, the appearance of the place made Izuku feel a bit uneasy, like his instincts were telling him to turn around. Tomura Shigaraki was in this eerie version of a cafe, and who knows what he planned to do to Izuku. The green-haired hero swallowed and clenched his fist, trying to build up his courage. Since when was he such a coward? If he wanted to be a hero, he would obviously have to stand up against villains. Come on, let's go, Izuku-kun. Yu chirped, grabbing Izuku's hand and leading him inside the cafe. However, the scene that Izuku and Yu walked into was not what either of them expected to see. You're going to mess everything up, you dummy, cried a female voice nearby. A girl threw what looked to be a coffee past them at the guy behind the counter, who dodged it quickly but looked back at her with an irritated expression. You brat. You're going to clean that up, you know? He said blankly. No way. You can't even make a decent coffee. So I'm just going to return this junk you call coffee before you get us in trouble, the girl yelled at him. She had light, soft blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, matching yellow eyes, and was wearing a green and white waitress uniform. The man behind the counter wore the same outfit, but it made his much darker and more brooding appearance stand out. He had black hair, piercing blue eyes with purple patches of skin under his eyes, arms, ears, and neck. They both looked completely different from one another, but they shared a similar aura that suggested danger. Shut up. You're being annoying and in front of your customers, the man added, pointing to Izuku and Yu, who were still standing awkwardly in front of the door. The girl blinked, then smiled a toothy grin. Hi. Sorry about the problem over there. How can I help you? Her demeanor shifted from bratty to sweet, yet there was something unsettling about her expression. Izuku shuffled back and forth on his feet, feeling uncomfortable as he muttered a reply. I'm here to meet up with someone, Izuku said. The girl tilted her head, her strange smile still in place. Huh. Her eyes didn't look confused, but she just stood there in front of the already very awkward boy, who was trying to hide his shy face behind his arms, probably not helping with the girl's creepy grin as she stared at him in silence. Toga! Bring the UA kid over here and stop wasting everyone's time, Shigaraki snapped from a booth in the corner. At that point, Izuku happily went over to escape the girl known as Toga. Took you long enough, muttered Shigaraki as Izuku sat down, and you sat beside him. Shigaraki was wearing his usual black hood and jeans with red sneakers, but he had his hood down today, allowing Izuku to talk to him face to face. Izuku sat silent for a moment before Shigaraki cleared his raspy throat and began to speak. What did you tell you before coming here? He asked. Izuku flinched, then answered, just that. You wanted to talk to me. Shigaraki nodded, leaning over the table slightly. I want you to work here. At the cafe with Dabi and Toga. Echa. Why would you? Izuku trailed off, confused. Shigaraki propped up his elbow and leaned against his hand, staring deadpan at Izuku. Because I said so. I won't tell him the reason why Izuku Midoriya is going to work under me at this cafe, but that it's for his own good. Chapter 8. Excuse me? Sir, more coffee please? Oh, of course. Izuku hurried around the small coffee shop, taking orders and serving customers. He had been working at the Starcoin coffee shop for about 2 weeks now, thanks to Tomura Shigaraki, who insisted that Izuku needed to be part of this cafe to ensure his safety. Not that Izuku minded much when faced with such a threat. The Greenette was doing well. He was a diligent worker and even attracted more customers with his warm, welcoming demeanor. That morning, a young girl with curly blonde hair and blue horns accidentally spilled her coffee on Izuku. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry, she exclaimed, frantically trying to clean his shirt with a napkin. Izuku smiled shyly and reassured her. It's okay. Here, let me show you there's no hard feelings. He handed her a fresh cup of coffee. See? She calmed down, though a heavy blush spread across her cheeks. Yeah, okay. She thanked him and quickly left the shop, giggling as she went. I'll definitely come back, she said to herself, loud enough for Tomura, who had just walked in, to hear. He shot Izuku a sharp look as he cleaned up the small mess on the counter. What are you up to, Brat? He questioned. Izuku looked up at the familiar nickname and the voice that accompanied it. Oh, Shiga. Shut it. Not in public, Shigaraki growled. Oh, what do I call you in public? Izuku whispered. Shigaraki thought for a moment, then sighed. How the hell should I know? Figure it out yourself. He snapped. Shirkuin? Izuku asked quietly, nervously poking his index fingers together, hoping this name would be acceptable to the villain, who was known for being particular. Surprisingly, Shigaraki didn't object to the nickname Shirkuin and allowed Izuku to use it without complaints. So what brings you here? You don't usually come in without a reason. Izuku asked as they sat at a table. The blue-haired male circled the rim of his cup, not bothering to drink. I came to make sure you weren't messing things up, especially with those two. Those two referred to Toga and Dabi, whom Izuku had already awkwardly met. Them? They're not that bad. Izuku replied nervously. In truth, Dabi wasn't much of a bother. He didn't mind Izuku's presence, especially since the Greenette often offered to help. So yes, maybe Izuku was a bit taken advantage of, but at least Dabi didn't threaten him every 5 minutes. Plus, he didn't seem to enjoy working for Shigaraki either, so they had that in common. Toga was another story. She had convinced Izuku that she was a bit eccentric and seemed to enjoy the uniform as a form of dress-up. She was strange, to say the least, but at least she engaged in conversation, unlike Izuku's other coworker. Sometimes, she could even bring a smile of concern to his face. That counted for something, right? In a way, both had their perks. Actually, Shirkuin, I don't mind working with Dabi and Toga. They're both decent workers for being, and I've been doing pretty well. In fact, this week, latte sales have been. I didn't mean how much stupid coffee you sold, you idiot. I meant how are you doing? Shigaraki smacked the top of Izuku's head, but was this his way of looking out for Izuku? Whoa, hold on a minute. Don't flatter yourself with thoughts like that, Izuku, he told himself seriously. This guy would turn on you in a second without a second thought. The intense stare Shigaraki gave only reinforced Izuku's point. The hero shuddered. Anyway, I'm doing fine, he answered quietly, though I might have to come in less. You see, the sports festival is coming up and The what? You mean that lame show they put on every year? You could be doing much more useful things than playing track and field on TV. He retorted. Besides, I can't have you getting hurt when I need you for other things besides that festival. Shigaraki added. Like what? Izuku asked slowly. None of your business and I'm leaving now. Shigaraki snapped, getting up from his chair and heading for the door. And next time, add more sugar to your coffee. It tastes terrible. All right. Izuku sighed. How did he end up in this situation again? He asked himself that every day. And I'll think about that. What was it called again? The villain asked as he reached for the door. The sports festival, he replied, scratching his cheek. He held the door open for Tomura, who seemed to be struggling with it. It must be hard doing tasks with his quirk. Izuku noted. Yeah, I'll think about it. Just get back to work, Brat. Shigaraki dismissed him as he walked through the door, leaving Izuku alone in the cafe. All right. The high school student called out, even though Tomura had already left. At least he might not try to stop me from entering the festival, Izuku thought, holding on to a glimmer of hope that maybe not all of this would turn out badly in the end. Oh, how wrong he was going to be. Chapter 9. Whether or not Shoto Todoroki had a crush on the successor of All Might was none of your concern. He knew that crushes and relationships would get him nowhere in his goal to overcome his father and become a great hero. He was sure Izuku Midoriya felt the same way. That kind of affection was quite unnecessary. He wouldn't fall in love because he didn't have time. Yet, deep down, he knew he was lying to himself. Every time Shoto saw couples or other students confessing to each other, he felt a pang of longing when he witnessed their joy and the promise of happiness. It hurt because Todoroki didn't trust that pursuing someone would lead to happiness for him. When he was younger, he thought his mother was happy, but that illusion shattered when he witnessed the pain inflicted by his father, someone consumed by ambition. Shoto's greatest fear was becoming like him. No, he would never end up like Endeavor. But if he truly believed that, why was he working so hard to distance himself from everyone, including Izuku? Was he really afraid of hurting someone he cared for, just like the monster known as his father? Hey, Todoroki! Denki and Kirishima approached the mismatched-eyed hero trainee. We're all heading to the arcade tonight since Midoriya hasn't been out much lately. Wanna join us? It'll be fun. Denki insisted eagerly. Class had just ended, and Shoto hadn't even had a moment to gather his things before the two excitedly bombarded him with their plans. Thank you for the offer, but Shoto tried to politely decline. He had planned to train extra after class and wasn't intending to leave the school until late. No, we're all going and you're expected to be there. We're meeting up at 6 after school at the Nikishima arcade downtown. Kirishima informed the confused classmate, who was overwhelmed by the sudden influx of information. We need the guys to keep the others out of trouble, he added confidently. I said I'm not going. I'm sorry, but I don't have time to waste doing something as trivial as playing at an arcade. Ask someone else, he said coldly as he stood up, grabbed his school bag, and pushed past Denki and Kirishima without a second thought, leaving the other two in shocked silence. It wasn't that Shoto was uninterested in spending time with his classmates, even if they weren't going to an arcade. He needed to practice, work hard on his classes, and not waste his time on activities that wouldn't help him in the long run. Todoroki sighed softly to himself. Was he too harsh on them? No, those two would be fine, he thought. Now, Todoroki wasn't sure why, but he believed Midoriya was also wasting his time. Didn't he understand that the most important goal of a UA student was to perfect their quirk? That classmates and activities could block their progress? Maybe Midoriya was just naive. He always talked about being a hero, but why did his perspective differ so much from Shoto's? Perhaps Todoroki was just that different from him, maybe another sign that he was just like his. No. Stop thinking like that, Shoto, Todoroki mumbled to himself as he crossed the street toward his house. You're not like him. You're not like anyone. Hey, Midoriya. A voice called out ahead of Todoroki across the street. There was Izuku and the rest of Class 1A. They appeared to be waiting for Midoriya to join them. He ran over quickly, his freckled face beaming with his usual sweet smile, something that made Shoto uncomfortable when he saw it. Todoroki watched from a distance as his fellow UA classmates chatted outside what was likely the arcade. They laughed and talked excitedly, completely unaware of Shoto, who had stopped on the sidewalk to observe them. The group, along with Izuku, who Todoroki noticed was wearing an employee uniform beneath his jacket, entered the arcade with cheers and laughter. Whatever, Todoroki mumbled with a small shrug. He couldn't dictate how they lived their lives anyway. However, he stopped when he sensed a dark and unsettling aura nearby. Shoto immediately halted and scanned the area, but all he saw were people leaving work, cars driving by, and other teens heading home. The only unusual sight was a stranger in a black hoodie across the street, seemingly fixated on an advertisement on a building next to the arcade. Strange. Why was his heart racing? Was it just nerves about the upcoming sports festival? His father would be there, likely trying to persuade him to use his left side. Shoto had no intention of yielding to his father's wishes. Yet, he couldn't help but let the thought of his mother watching him on TV slip into his mind. She probably couldn't anyway. It was better not to dwell on such things. Better not to get distracted. It. Just calm down. You're stressed, Todoroki reminded himself as he continued walking home, leaving the arcade, the stranger, and his classmates behind without a second thought. Something that I would have never guessed about Tomura Shigaraki was something I was about to learn in a way I never expected. Chapter 10. Hey Midoriya. We're going to watch the girls play Dancing Rush Stardom. Want to join us when you're done? Kirishima asked Izuku, who was focused on a small arcade game, Street Fighter. It had been ages since he last played, but he was surprisingly good at it. Izuku had always enjoyed gaming, especially fighting games. Perhaps he liked the thrill of defeating opponents and drawing inspiration for his own moves as a hero in training. Sure thing, Kirishima, Izuku replied with a smile, glancing over his shoulder. His friend nodded and left him to finish the game. Wow. This level is definitely harder than the last one. I think the last time I played this was back in elementary school. I'm probably not as good as I used to be. Shaking the joystick, Izuku focused intently on the screen. Dang it. He sighed in defeat as his character was defeated, and the words, "loser," flashed across the screen. Leaning back in his chair, he closed his eyes for a moment. It was just a small defeat, no big deal. He should catch up with the others who had gone off to watch his female classmates dance. "You're not very good at that game." Izuku's eyes shot open to find the last person he expected hovering above him. Shirkuin? He gasped, shocked to see the villain here of all places. Given that Tomura had forced Izuku to work evenings at a coffee shop, perhaps it wasn't so surprising after all. "Who did you expect?" Tomura snapped, pulling his black hood further down over his face, his red eyes glowing ominously in the shadows as they locked onto Izuku's green orbs. "What are you doing here with the other UA students? Don't you have schoolwork or something?" he sneered, glancing at the arcade screen. "We're just here to hang out, me and my classmates. Don't even think about starting anything here. With 20 UA students around, you wouldn't stand a chance. I couldn't care less what you're all here to do. I come here when I'm bored." Tomura leaned over Izuku, inserting a few coins into the arcade machine as they both watched the game restart. The close contact made Izuku uncomfortable in ways he couldn't quite articulate. "You were panicking, and that's how you lost," Tomura stated, taking over the controls. Izuku found himself wedged between Tomura's chest and the game, his sides trapped by the villain's long arms. "This level is easy. Figures you can't win. What do they teach you in that hero school anyway, besides being pathetic and easily manipulated?" he taunted, a grin spreading across his face as he became engrossed in the game. Izuku inhaled deeply, placing his clenched fists in his lap as he watched Tomura play Street Fighter. To his surprise, Tomura was incredibly skilled, smashing buttons with impressive speed. The excitement of the battle drew Izuku to the edge of his seat, his palms sweating with anticipation as he held his breath, caught up in the suspense of the match. He found himself cheering for Tomura when the words, "winner," appeared in green across the screen. He had won. "You did it, Shirkuin!" Izuku exclaimed, his eyes wide with amazement. Tomura glanced down at him, observing his expression. "And you hardly lost any life at all." Even Izuku was impressed, much like a child watching an older kid perform an incredible feat, "and you even had your own backup plan. I could tell by the way you held onto the extra objects you could have thrown but didn't. And how did you get Ken to pull off that last move? I haven't played since I was a kid, but I have some questions about the combos you recommend." Izuku's enthusiastic rant came to an abrupt stop. What was he doing? Izuku's breath hitched, and he looked down into his lap, speaking to it instead of the villain hovering above him. "I didn't think villains ever had time to play video games." With his gaze lowered, he noticed Tomura's fingers awkwardly positioned around the controls. Some fingers weren't touching them, likely due to Tomura's quirk. It must have been uncomfortable, especially after all the effort he had put into winning the level. As if to prove Izuku's point, Tomura stretched his cramped fingers. For some reason, Tomura felt off when Izuku stopped his excited praise. "So," he questioned in a cold tone, "you think just because you're a hero and I'm a villain, I can't do something normal? You heroes are so stuck up, huh?" With that, Tomura stepped away from the game and from Izuku, giving the teenager some space. Izuku tried to respond, but the words escaped him. In a way, Tomura's perspective made sense, and for some reason, Izuku, the UA student whose fate kept intertwining with Tomura Shigaraki, felt just a hint of guilt for how much sense Tomura's point made. The following Monday, Izuku Midoriya decided to use his lunch PRD to visit the support department's lab. He had something important he wanted to ask and needed to borrow a few items. He figured the best person to consult would be someone skilled in building and technology. "Hello? I'm Izuku Midoriya from Class 1. He paused as he noticed someone exiting the room just as he entered. "Todoroki? What are you doing here?" Izuku asked, surprised to see his classmate. With the sports festival approaching, it made sense that Todoroki might be here for training. "Funny seeing you here," he added with a nervous laugh, scratching his cheek. Todoroki regarded him with his usual calm demeanor, nodding slightly as he walked past Izuku without saying a word. "Oh, see you later then," Izuku said awkwardly, turning to wave goodbye. he sighed, unable to finish his thought. Todoroki's aloofness was nothing new, but sometimes Izuku wondered if his classmate enjoyed being around others. If that were true, wouldn't Todoroki feel lonely? Maybe he just doesn't like you? A thought slipped through Izuku's mind, but he quickly shook his head. They had only known each other for a short time. Perhaps Todoroki wasn't ready to open up yet. Izuku could wait. After all, he still had questions about Todoroki's quirk, and making a new friend wouldn't hurt either. Izuku stepped into the support department's lab, which was filled with gadgets, half-finished projects, scraps of metal, and tools scattered everywhere. It looked like a whirlwind of creativity had taken over the room. He carefully entered and shut the door behind him, smiling nervously. "Anyone here? I'm Izuku Midoriya from Class 1A." He was interrupted when a girl with pink hair suddenly shot past him. Izuku yelped, quickly rolling to the side to avoid her. He cautiously lowered his arms and looked back at the girl, who was now on the floor surrounded by broken metal pieces. Despite the chaos, she wore a huge grin, as if she had just experienced the most exhilarating moment. "Oh my gosh! Are you okay?" Izuku exclaimed, jumping to his feet to help her, but she sat up immediately, her smile unwavering and even growing wider. "Did you see that? Ha! I'm a genius! Ha!" she shouted with excitement. "Quick! I need my notepad. I have to write this down. I only had to rebuild it 267 times, and it still went horizontal." She laughed joyfully, standing up and rushing across the room to grab a notebook from a toolbox. She returned, crouching in front of the wrecked machine, and began scribbling notes while humming to herself. Izuku stood there awkwardly until he found the courage to clear his throat and wave at her. "Hi, I'm Izuku Midoriya from Class 1A, and I wanted to ask someone in the support department if I could borrow a few things." He spoke politely, a hint of anxiety in his voice. "Oh." The girl finally noticed him. "Hey, you look smart. What do you need? Did you see my baby in action? Wasn't she a beauty exploding like that?" she gushed, jumping to her feet and pushing her goggles up onto her forehead. "I'm May Hatsum, the most amazing inventor you'll meet. I'm in the support department, but that's obvious, huh?" She greeted him enthusiastically, extending a gloved hand covered in oil. Izuku, being polite, shook her hand. "Nice to meet you, Hatsum-san," he replied. "I was hoping to borrow some." Before he could finish, May began suggesting various ideas and gadgets he might need. "What do you need? A support item for the festival? A tune-up? Something that could blow up an entire area of 1,000. And 300 square miles?" she asked eagerly. "I can build it. Just tell me what you need. Don't be shy. Speak up, Midoriya-san." When Izuku finally managed to speak, he quickly said, "I need canvas fabric, leather, another durable but softer fabric, and strong sewing needles." He added, pulling out an open notebook from his backpack to show her his sketch. He knew it would be faster and better if he asked May to build it, but he didn't want to put her in that position. "Leather? What are you building? Some kind of torture device?" May asked curiously, handing back the notebook. "I'd say the design is fine. It's a bit unusual, but it will work." "What do you need them for?" she inquired, walking over to a cabinet filled with various cloth materials. Just a new costume idea," Izuku replied, scratching his neck. "But if it's okay with you, could you keep this a secret, May-san?" he asked hopefully. "No problem. I have secret projects of my own," she replied with a thumbs up, making Izuku sigh with relief. He was glad he could trust her not to tell anyone. He didn't want it to become a big deal, especially since he didn't want May, someone innocent, to get caught up in his troubles. "Here you go." May handed Izuku a cardboard box filled with the supplies neatly organized. "Just let me know if you want me to build anything for you. I can create any gadget you need." I have a feeling that sounded differently in your head," Izuku muttered to himself, his face turning red. After thanking May for her time, tools, and materials, the young UA student left the support department lab and continued on his way to his locker. He hoped to put everything away and catch a bit of time with his friends before their next class. Izuku's mental notes on Tomura Shigaraki No. 1. Chapter 11. Why would I waste my time introducing him to Master now? I am curious why Master has yet to tell me what UA has that's so important. Maybe he'll finally trust me more if I bring him something rewarding. Maybe. All Might's successor? Chapter 12. Master Shigaraki. A polite voice spoke up, hovering over the blue-haired male who was sleeping awkwardly at the bar counter. The villain's hideout seemed blurry at first until Tomura rubbed his eyes with his fingers and noticed an orange-colored tablet in front of him. That was something Kurogiri always did in the morning, leave a vitamin C for the leader. Every time, Tomura's reaction was the same, to pick it up with his fingers. Kurogiri often sighed internally, feeling like he was raising a child instead of leading the League of Villains. However, he had grown accustomed to it and kept his thoughts to himself, though this morning he was curious about what was on Tomura's mind. You were mumbling a lot in your sleep. Is something the matter, Master Tomura? Kurogiri asked as he swept the small flakes of dust off the counter. He didn't expect much of a response, but lately, Shigaraki seemed unusually quiet. I was not, Tomura replied in a tired, raspy voice. I've been thinking of the League's next move. Kurogiri, how much do you know about the sports festival? The competition among young heroes? I've seen it on TV but never really watched it. But is our next move related to it? Kurogiri asked. The sports festival occurred every year, and people made a big deal about it. But exposing quirks and weaknesses on national television didn't always seem like a good idea, especially for aspiring heroes. Don't think we're going to do something reckless and barge in there. We have the UA Brat for a reason. He was already complaining about wanting to go. I was thinking, while the pro heroes and teachers are busy with the festival, we can send him in to search for what Master is looking for, Tomura explained confidently. Once I retrieve the hidden weapon Nizu has, Master will. Master Shigaraki, our Master doesn't know about you blackmailing Izuku Midoriya, does he? Kurogiri suddenly asked, having held those words back for a while. As much as I trust your judgment, hiding things from our Master may not be wise. Shut up. Tomura snapped, knocking the glass Kurogiri was cleaning onto the floor with a crash, causing Kurogiri to fall silent as he usually did. Tomura punched the bar counter in frustration. Demon it. If I were more worthy, maybe this wouldn't have happened, but when I show Izuku Midoriya to Master. We're home. And no, we're not, shouted two familiar voices as the front door swung open with a loud slam, knocking down a newspaper clipping off the wall, creating another mess for Kurogiri to clean up. Twice, Dabi and Toga marched inside suddenly, making Tomura groan and turn away from them. Hey, Mr. Leader. Are you having an amazing day like us? Our day is Twice announced, his two personalities clashing as usual. Toga leaned over her knees, smiling widely as she asked, Hey Dabi-kun wants to know when we can quit working at the coffee shop. Tell Stitchface he can forget it, Tomura retorted with a glare, then turned his attention back to the bar, signaling for Kurogiri to get him another drink. Even at this early hour, he needed something to distract himself from the chaos behind him. He gulped down the shot Kurogiri handed him, feeling irritated but trying to focus on his thoughts when an idea crept into his mind. Master Tomura? Kurogiri questioned as he noticed Tomura pulling out a sleek black phone from his pocket and getting off the bar stool. Brat? Meet me at the coordinates I'm sending you, Tomura said, typing something into the device. Izuku's voice came through on the other line. Yeah? Brat? What is it? He asked hesitantly, wondering what the villain wanted from him this early. Get your stuff and meet me this evening at the same park as last time. You wanted to go to the sports festival, right? Tomura asked, scratching his neck as he put on his black hoodie and opened the door to leave the headquarters. Well then, we're going to have to train you. Chapter 13. Can this get any worse? Izuku muttered to himself after ending the call with Shigaraki. He sighed, scratching his head in frustration as he stared down at his shoes. He had been doing his daily run before school, but lately he had increased his workout for the festival. Now, Shigaraki wanted him to push even harder? Izuku wasn't lazy, he wanted to be in top shape for the big event. However, the thought of spending more time with the leader of villains was far from appealing. With another sigh, Izuku tucked his phone into his back pocket and, looked around the park before jogging back home. He quickly showered and changed into his UA uniform. He packed a clean pair of blue basketball shorts and a white t-shirt with All Might printed on the front into a duffel bag, along with a pair of running shoes. Unsure of what Shigaraki's idea of training entailed, he made sure to include a small first aid kit and the walkie-talkie Tomura had given him. As he stepped out of his room with his duffel and school bag, his mother greeted him with the sound of dishes clattering and the aroma of breakfast. "Ah, you're back from your run? I wish you wouldn't push yourself too hard. It's always okay to take a break. I know you can handle yourself, but you're my son, and I can't help but worry, especially after what happened at the USJ. I just can't bear the thought of anything like that happening again," Inko said, her voice filled with concern. Izuku sat down to eat his steamed rice and grilled fish, feeling a twinge of guilt as he listened to her. "I promise I'll be safe, Mom. Don't worry. I've gotten a lot stronger," he said confidently, though his focused expression suggested otherwise. "Izuku dear, you've been staring at your rice bowl for a while now. Are you sure you're absolutely okay?" Inko asked, her hands clasped together as she watched him. "I will," Izuku promised, quickly getting up from the table. "But I gotta go before I'm late again." His words only seemed to heighten his mother's anxiety. "What do you mean, late again?" "Izuku, come back." Inko called after him, but he had already dashed out the door. School went as usual. Izuku focused intently on his work while trying to think about what to expect at the upcoming sports festival, ways to improve his training schedule, and most importantly, how to deal with the villains. He was puzzled about how Tomura had discovered One for All. Was he spying on All Might? Izuku mentally groaned and continued scribbling answers on his paper. He had too much on his plate and found it impossible to concentrate. Working at a coffee shop with two more villains didn't help either. It felt like he was always being watched, with someone from the league lurking nearby. Even at school, he had the communicator with him, and "Tomura always knows where I am." Izuku muttered to himself, unaware that he was speaking out loud, though his classmates assumed he was just talking to himself. Could the communicator have a tracking system? Maybe its real purpose isn't even for communication, and that's why it only works from Tomura's end. He can always know where I am. His thoughts raced as he began to crack the pencil in his hand, his green eyes widening as he pieced together an idea. "Midoriya, are you paying attention?" Aizawa's voice snapped Izuku back to reality. He quickly nodded and hunched over his homework. "Should I just tell All Might?" he thought, then quickly dismissed the idea. "I can't jeopardize his secret and career. I got into this mess, I'll find a way out." After school that day, Izuku hurried from class, forgetting to say goodbye to his classmates. He was too lost in thought. Just as he was about to dash out of the building after changing back into his school shoes, someone unexpectedly stopped him. Todoroki was there, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder from behind and not letting go until Izuku turned around. "You seemed off during class," Todoroki observed, his usual stoic expression in place. Sorry, I haven't been feeling well. In fact, I need to go home and rest," Izuku replied awkwardly. "Don't want to be anything less than my best for the festival." He began to walk away, stumbling slightly, and waved nervously over his shoulder before running off, leaving Todoroki watching him until he disappeared from sight. Interesting, Todoroki thought. Then why did he have that sports duffel bag? Chapter 14. Izuku panted heavily, trying to catch his breath as he knelt before Shigaraki. Sweat dripped down his exhausted body, and he struggled to steady himself, his hands gripping his knees. He had been thrown into this intense situation without any preparation, and even though he was fit, he was feeling the strain. He stood up straight, wiping his brow as he faced the villain, who regarded him with an unyielding stare. "You took your sweet time," Shigaraki remarked, his voice laced with boredom and annoyance. He stood with his arms crossed, dressed in black slacks and a matching hoodie, his red sneakers contrasting sharply. It made Izuku wonder if he ever changed clothes, considering the nature of Shigaraki's quirk. Izuku mentally noted that Shigaraki rarely changed outfits, likely because his quirk would disintegrate any clothing he wore. It was a peculiar weakness that made Izuku ponder what other vulnerabilities the villain might have. At that moment, neither of them was in an NTMT situation, despite any earlier impressions. Izuku had finally arrived at the park after school, just as Shigaraki had instructed. "How did you know my phone number?" Izuku asked, his brows furrowing in concern. The longer he spent around Shigaraki, the more he felt like a pawn in a dangerous game, and it was starting to frustrate him. "Because I do, Brat. Why do you ask so many annoying questions?" Shigaraki replied, slipping his phone back into his pocket after checking the time. "If you have my phone number, why do we need the communicators?" Izuku pressed, irritation creeping into his voice. Shigaraki's expression darkened slightly. "I said your questions were annoying," he snapped, turning to walk toward a more secluded area of the park. The evening sky was painted in hues of pink and purple as the sun began to set. "Hurry up." Izuku watched him, biting his lip. "So the communicator is some sort of tracking device. That means he knows where I live. That could put my mom in danger. Hopefully, he thinks I live alone." He followed Shigaraki cautiously, recalling their last encounter had been fraught with unexpected danger. He wasn't sure what Shigaraki's idea of training entailed, but he suspected it would be intense, perhaps even ruthless. As they approached the park's public restrooms, Izuku adjusted the duffel bag slung over his shoulder and stepped inside. However, just as he opened the door, Shigaraki's voice cut through the air. "Where are you going?" "I'm going this way," he said sharply, catching Izuku off guard. "I was just going to change." "I can't train in my school uniform," Izuku replied, trying to keep his tone steady. He didn't want to risk his clothes getting damaged or destroyed during training, especially since his mom would definitely notice if they came back in tatters. "Then let's hurry up," Shigaraki said flatly, pushing Izuku forward. The hero was taken aback, shaking his head in protest. He attempted to explain that he didn't want Shigaraki following him into the restroom, but the situation felt increasingly awkward. "Get in and hurry up," Shigaraki ordered, shoving Izuku into the cramped bathroom. The space was barely big enough for one person, let alone two, especially with Shigaraki's imposing presence looming over him. Izuku felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him. Changing in front of a villain was not something he had anticipated. Frozen in place, Izuku clutched his duffel bag tightly, feeling nervous and confused. His mind went blank, and he couldn't seem to muster the courage to move or speak. Shigaraki leaned against the door, arms crossed, his gaze fixed on Izuku with an impatient glare. "What the hell is the matter now? I thought you wanted to prepare for the festival. I said I would make sure you were trained for it. I can't trust the heroes to get you ready the way I want, so I'll do it myself like I have to do everything," he grumbled, sounding tired and irritable. Maybe he just hadn't gotten enough sleep. "I'm not changing with you here," Izuku declared, feeling a surge of bravery that quickly faded when Tomura suddenly slammed his hand against the wall behind Izuku, closing the space between them and bringing their faces mere inches apart. Tomura's breath, tinged with the scent of liquor, brushed against Izuku's freckled face, which had unknowingly turned a deeper shade of red, though Izuku was too focused on his fear to notice. With just one step forward, Tomura was close enough that their bodies nearly touched. "I'm not here to watch you get dressed, you little whining hero," he snarled, growing increasingly irritated with how long it was taking. "I thought if I was here, you'd hurry up, but somehow you're taking even longer." Izuku cowered back, feeling the intensity of Tomura's anger. "Now get dressed, or I'll do it myself, or you can train in nothing." The seriousness in Tomura's tone sent a shiver down Izuku's spine. With a small gulp, Izuku dropped his duffel bag between their feet and began undoing his tie and jacket, but hesitated when he reached the buttons of his white shirt. The thought of Tomura addressing him left him feeling exposed, and he couldn't imagine how he would explain that to his mother if he came home without clothes. He slid his jacket down his arms, letting it fall behind him onto the floor. "Can you at least close your eyes?" he muttered, his gaze fixed downward, too shy to meet Tomura's eyes, which had finally noticed something. Izuku was blushing. In that moment, the tension filled with threats and harsh tones seemed to dissipate. Without moving his hand away, Tomura groaned quietly and closed his eyes, appearing a little less angry now. "Yeah," he muttered in his usual gravelly voice. Tomura could hear the sounds of Izuku awkwardly undressing, the rustle of fabric, the zipper of the bag as he pulled out his clothes, and the soft thud of Izuku's sneakers hitting the floor. These were sounds Tomura never thought he would enjoy listening to. After a few minutes longer than expected, since Izuku was trying his best to avoid any contact, he managed to put on his shirt, shorts, and shoes, but something held him back from telling Tomura he was done. What was it? I've never seen him this close before, Izuku thought to himself, staring at Tomura, whose eyes were still shut but seemed calm. With a soft, curious expression, Izuku unconsciously leaned in closer, inspecting Tomura's features up close. His pale skin, the small mole below his lip, the faint scar cutting across his chapped lips, and the dark bags under his eyes. He looks worn out. I wonder what happened. Izuku pondered, momentarily lost in thought. But after a second, he quickly snapped out of it, cleared his throat, and said clearly to Tomura, I'm done now. Why do you keep staring at me like that? Keep it up, and I'll disintegrate your face. Tomura warned. They were back outside now, with Izuku on the ground stretching his legs and arms, preparing for training, while Tomura sat a few feet away, occasionally pulling out his phone to text someone before putting it back down. Are you even listening? Why was Tomura asking that when he was the one glued to his phone? Who was he talking to anyway? Izuku didn't answer immediately and instead turned away. I know you wouldn't do that here. It's a public park and someone would see you, he muttered, frowning as he adjusted his shoelaces. What are we even going to do? He asked, trying to keep his impatience in check, though he just wanted to get home as quickly as possible. Ever since their earlier encounter, he felt a mix of confusion, unease, and a racing heartbeat that made his head spin. It was that feeling you get when you know you've done something wrong but can't do anything about it, just waiting for the moment to pass. Why do I feel so guilty? Did I do something wrong? Izuku thought seriously to himself. Get up, Tomura ordered as he stood, putting his phone back into his pocket. You never told me what we're going to do first, Izuku pointed out as he stood up as instructed. Unfortunately for him, asking that question was a mistake. The grin spreading across Tomura's face sent chills down Izuku's spine as he watched the taller villain pop his knuckles and say with a grin, run. Huh? Izuku looked confused and worried, taking a step back as Tomura stepped forward. But what are you? You don't practice jogging or anything? Tomura asked bluntly, staring at Izuku as if he were wasting his time. Izuku blinked, realizing he had misinterpreted the situation. His first thought was that Tomura was planning to chase him, but he just wanted Izuku to run laps. I do, Izuku replied after a moment, his heart slowing down as he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Why had he jumped to conclusions so quickly? Was it because Tomura was a villain, and Izuku instinctively went into defense mode? Did he really believe Tomura was ready to attack him at any moment? Did he automatically assume the worst because Tomura was a villain? But wasn't that a normal reaction? It was like at the arcade. Izuku remembered, surprised that Tomura was good at video games just because he was a villain. It was almost as if he had forgotten that villains were normal people too. Just, well, villains. Maybe. Let's get going then. Tomura snapped Izuku out of his thoughts. Izuku blinked, rubbing his eyes, and nodded, but paused when he saw Tomura already taking a few steps toward the sidewalk, as if he planned to join him. Are you running with me? Izuku asked, confusion evident in his tone. However, Tomura shook his head almost immediately, the very idea of running with Izuku making him feel uneasy. Not exactly. Someone gave me some ideas on ways to shape you up that the heroes wouldn't think of teaching you at your so-called hero school, Tomura replied, stretching his neck as he glanced back at Izuku, who was waiting behind him, ready to start. Let's get started then, Tomura instructed. Izuku found himself doing laps around the pond in the center of the park, starting with some stretching exercises. He was also being timed. It could have been worse for the UA student. Usually, when training with All Might, Izuku felt relaxed and steady. He hadn't trained with the pro hero since before the attack on the USJ, as All Might had given Izuku some space after the incident and the boy's subsequent feelings of sadness. But training with Shigaraki now was different. Got you, hero. Izuku suddenly leaned to his left, maintaining his fast pace as he darted off the pavement, nearly stumbling into the duck pond. He managed to land on his hands, performing a cartwheel and a flip, narrowly avoiding the murky water. Glancing over his shoulder, he saw Shigaraki only a few yards away, reaching out toward him. Izuku didn't wait around to find out what would happen next. His breath hitched, and a bead of nervous sweat rolled down his face, but he quickly continued to escape the villain by darting into the trees. His shirt and shorts were sweaty and dirty, and he was covered in burrs and stickers from the overgrown weeds he was running through. His shoelaces were coming undone. He never told me he was getting help. Izuku panted to himself, feeling branches scrape against his exposed legs and arms. I shouldn't be surprised if he plays dirty though, he reminded himself. Master Tomura, please don't actually harm Midoriya, Kurogyari casually reminded Tomura from a short distance. The Portal Quirk villain stood under a tree, watching and assisting Tomura as he chased Izuku, who was running laps while trying to evade Tomura's surprise attacks from portals. It seemed to Izuku that Tomura wasn't going easy on him, and if something went wrong, it wouldn't matter much to Tomura. Kurogyari didn't mind aiding his master in training the blackmailed hero, but he was also curious about Tomura's interactions with Izuku. There was something off about them. Even though Tomura wasn't kind or polite to Izuku, he wasn't outright cruel either. One could argue that he had Izuku under a contract and was threatening to expose his secret, known only to Tomura, Kurogyari, Izuku, and All Might. But Kurogyari wondered about Tomura's true motives for blackmailing Izuku. Is it really to impress his own master? If Nizu has something the villains must retrieve, why use Izuku to capture it? He is obviously close to the #1 hero. Wasn't that a risky choice? And how did Tomura figure out the secret between Izuku and All Might? Kurogyari pondered as he created another portal for Tomura, which appeared in front of Izuku. The well-mannered villain followed calmly after them. Luckily, it was already dark, so no one else was around in the park at this hour. If someone had been there, they would have questioned why. Izuku's breath hitched again as he saw the black portal open up once more, causing him to make a sudden stop and turn right, jumping over a bench as he continued his escape. This is more like hunting than training, he muttered to himself. This was certainly an unconventional way of training. Midoriya couldn't fight Tomura up close, given the villain's advantage with his quirk and Kurogyari's assistance. I guess I'll just have to keep my distance until I can think of a plan. By the look on Tomura's face, he's pretty confident in this matchup, Izuku thought as he hid behind a tree, catching his breath and trying to devise a strategy. Maybe I can, Izuku began, but he was cut off by another portal appearing on his left side, and out leaped Tomura again. Izuku dodged and jumped into a tree, grabbing a branch and swinging himself up. He took off, carefully ascending from branch to branch, ducking and swerving to avoid sudden attacks that seemed to come out of nowhere. He kept a lookout for any dark spots nearby that might conceal Tomura. Izuku knew he had to get somewhere Kurogyari couldn't use his quirk, somewhere unfamiliar to him and out of sight. Suddenly, he remembered the public restroom from earlier, and it didn't seem far away. He set his destination and began to climb and swing through the trees even faster, hoping to reach it. He was almost there. If he could make it, he could think of a plan and outsmart these two. He just needed a moment to gather his thoughts. Izuku felt his foot suddenly slip, as if he had stepped into a hole, and gravity became his enemy. As he glanced down to see why the branch he had stepped on had given way, he was met with the unsettling sight of Tomura smiling up at him from below. Shigaraki's hand was holding on to what remained of the branch until it dissolved into dust, and Izuku found himself falling, past Tomura, who vanished back into Kurogyari's portal as he plummeted. The hero's training session had ended with a crash landing. The next thing Izuku remembered was waking up on the ground, a mild but intense pain radiating from his right leg. He shifted slightly and opened his green eyes, realizing he was right beneath the tree he had fallen from, thanks to Tomura. "You're still alive." A familiar voice sounded disappointed. Tomura crouched down beside Izuku, looming over him. "Why-ow?" Izuku winced, sitting up and gripping his shin tightly, shutting his eyes. He bit his lip and opened his eyes to inspect the injury. It didn't seem too serious, just a deep cut, but he knew walking would be a challenge for a few days. That was a problem since he wouldn't be able to take the train for the festival. Not that Izuku was eager to miss this unconventional training with the villains. Tomura's hazy eyes caught sight of Izuku's pained expression, prompting him to glance away toward Kurogiri, who had also been present. "That's enough for today. You're already hurt." "How pathetic," Tomura murmured, getting back to his feet and attempting to walk past Kurogiri, who placed a hand on his shoulder to signal him to stop. "Master Tomura, you cannot leave the young hero here," Kurogiri pointed out. "Says who? He can walk home himself," Tomura retorted, keeping his gaze fixed on the ground. "Then may I suggest a reason for you to reconsider? If Midoriya is left here without being taken home and treated, he won't recover, and therefore won't be able to fulfill the task we have asked of him." He added quietly so Izuku couldn't hear, "I don't have a tracking device for him, so I can't teleport him back. Only you can take him home so he can rest." Each word made Tomura tense up more and more until he finally turned back around, seeing Izuku still on the ground, looking up at him. And that's how Tomura Shigaraki found himself carrying Izuku back home that night. He propped Izuku onto his back, ignoring Kurogiri's farewells and wishes for safe travels, and began his journey to Izuku's apartment complex. He already knew where it was. I can only leave you in suspense about what will happen next when Izuku's mother opened the door to find the two of them on her doorstep. "Izuku? Who is this?" Inko Midoriya asked, concern etched across her face as her soft green eyes scanned the scene before her, her son riding piggyback on a stranger. A very suspicious stranger at that. It was nearly 9 on a Friday night, and her instincts kicked in. She opened the door wider and stepped onto the porch, hands clasped to her chest, panic rising as she bombarded the stranger with questions while checking on Izuku. "Oh my God! Izuku! Honey, what happened? Did you get hurt? You didn't breathe anything strange, did you?" Tomura stiffened. "Is this the Brat's mother? She's annoying," he thought, though he found it hard to believe that statement. His feet moved almost instinctively to follow the older woman, feeling a strange sense of relief that someone could help Izuku. After all, Shigaraki couldn't do much. His lack of medical experience and the nature of his quirk made it difficult to tend to Izuku's injury, and Tomura didn't want to deal with it. Inko quickly gestured for the two to enter the apartment as she rushed into the bathroom, instructing Izuku to rest on the couch while she fetched a first aid kit. She wasn't sure if her son was hurt, but the sight of him being carried home by a stranger suggested otherwise. Her instinct was to be prepared. "And you put him on the couch," she called to Tomura over her shoulder. The blue-haired boy blinked, taken aback by being ordered around by someone's mother. "The hell?" "Fine," Tomura muttered, dropping Izuku onto the couch. "I can't believe you got hurt so easily," he remarked, crossing his arms as he stood in front of Izuku, who wore a blank expression, seemingly in a daze. "Tomura Shigaraki is here. In my home. With my mom." Izuku thought repeatedly in horror as he stared at the ceiling. What if he tries to blackmail me knowing about her? Worse, what if he tries to hurt her? Tomura stared at Izuku in confusion. What was his problem? But before he could question Izuku's muttering, Inko returned, sitting beside her son and examining his face. "What happened?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. As Izuku assured her he just twisted his ankle, she wrapped his injury in gauze and disinfected his minor cuts. Then she turned to Tomura. "Do you know my son?" "Excuse me, but do you know my son? You weren't abandoned by the side of the road when this person found you, were you, Izuku?" Inko asked Tomura, then quickly returned her attention to Izuku, her voice rising with worry. It seemed she couldn't fathom that her son could be friends with Tomura, assuming he must have met him by chance, like someone gathering trash from the street. Certainly not the leader of the League of Villains, as Inko had no idea who Tomura really was. To be fair, Tomura didn't seem well-groomed or taken care of, but he took offense nonetheless. "Why, you little—" Tomura growled to himself through clenched teeth, ready to unleash his frustration on the poor woman. But Izuku quickly intervened when he noticed the look on Tomura's face, the same expression he received daily, which couldn't be good. I smell something burning." Izuku suddenly exclaimed, startling both Tomura and Inko. Do you? Oh dear. I was making katsudon your favorite. Inko began to panic, then noticed Tomura still standing there. Can you check on the food, please? I need to finish this, she asked hopefully, referring to putting away the medical supplies and checking on Izuku. Tomura blinked, taken aback by being asked to do chores as if he weren't a villain, but more like a... Fine, Tomura muttered, turning around and walking toward the kitchen, following the smell of pork and rice. Once he was out of sight, Inko leaned down to her son and whispered, Honey, who is that? He seems terribly scary. He won't hurt you, right? Inko couldn't bear the thought of her son getting hurt again, like at the Ushi. Remember when I said I got a job? My boss. Ha. Izuku replied, scratching his cheek, unsure if his mom would press further. To his surprise, her reaction was different. That's your boss? She exclaimed in a hushed tone. Why didn't you tell me sooner, Izuku? I need to thank him for giving you a job and a wonderful opportunity and for bringing you here. What a hero. She gasped, standing up. I'll ask him to stay for dinner, but you need to go shower and clean yourself up. Inko instructed Izuku, who gawked at her words. What? Was she really treating Tomura Shigaraki like some sort of war hero? Izuku practically choked on air and nearly fell off the couch as he watched his mother cheerfully head into the kitchen. While the two chatted, Tomura entered the kitchen, hands in his pockets. The sounds of sizzling pans filled the small apartment, and he observed the scene. A cutting board with chopped green onions, plates stacked on the counter. He walked up to the stove, peering over the pans, and turned down the heat on the pork, which seemed done. As he explored the room with his sharp red eyes, everything felt strange, as if he had stepped into a place he didn't belong. Oh, you already turned off the stove. Thank you, sorry, my son never told me your name, and he usually shares everything. Inko entered the kitchen, surprised to see Tomura had already turned off the stove and was shutting off the rice cooker just as she arrived. It's... Tomura hesitated, glancing to the side and down as... He thought. I can't tell her my real name. He grimaced internally, feeling Inko's patient gaze on him, completely unaware of the turmoil in his mind. Looking back up at her, he replied, It's Shimura. The name felt wrong as soon as it left his lips, and he almost let his frustration spill over onto Inko Midoriya. He couldn't say Tomura Shigaraki, either. Even if Inko didn't know who he was, if she mentioned knowing Tomura Shigaraki, word would spread quickly, and he could find himself in serious trouble. What bothered him most was that he had used from Shirkuin what Izuku called him in public. I see. It's nice to meet you, Mura-san. Inko smiled and bowed slightly. I'm Inko Midoriya, Izuku's mother. I'm really glad to finally meet you. You're so tall and thin. I insist you stay and eat to show my gratitude. She clasped her hands together, beaming at him like a mother eager to share her cooking and hear stories about her son. Tomura hadn't expected this. Diamenu, Kurojiri. I bet you knew something like this might happen. I'll deal with you when I get back. Great. The League of Villains leader is in my house. Worse, he's with my mother. What if he tries to harm her while I'm in here? Izuku thought to himself in the shower, feeling the warm water wash away the sweat and grime from his day at the park. Once he finished, he quickly grabbed a towel and wrapped it around his waist. He needed to get dressed to keep an eye on Tomura, who was in his home. Rushing out of the steamy bathroom, he changed into black sweatpants and an oversized white shirt that read, All Might, in bold letters. After putting on white cotton socks, he hurried out to find Tomura and his mom, anxiety gnawing at him as he pushed through the pain in his ankle. However, that was the opposite of what he expected. Tomura wasn't holding Izuku's mother hostage, nor was he causing her any harm. When Izuku rushed into the kitchen, he stopped short, witnessing Tomura at the stove, focused on sautéing onions and garlic with green onions in a pan. To Izuku, he looked surprisingly calm. Izuku, honey, you can sit down. Mura-san and I are almost finished. Oh, sit there instead so you can be next to him, Inko instructed, clearly enjoying the time spent with Izuku's friend. She had set the table and was pleased to see Tomura helping her cook. Izuku sat stiffly in his seat, hands clenched in his lap, his head lowered as he felt a wave of nervousness wash over him. He jumped when Tomura sat down beside him, hoping that if he remained still and quiet, he would be ignored by the villain next to him. That plan didn't work. Tomura leaned closer, whispering a chilling message that sent shivers down Izuku's spine. If you don't eat this, I will make you regret it. I've never cooked with someone's mother before, so I better not see you being a picky eater. Tomura warned, and Izuku knew he would have nightmares from seeing Tomura so serious over something like this. Why, sir? Izuku squeaked back, his appetite vanishing completely. Thus began the most unusual and nerve-wracking dinner Izuku had ever experienced. Yet, he would later realize it would also become one of the most memorable moments of his life. After dinner, the Midoriyas and Shigaraki moved from the dining room to the living room. Much to Tomura's dismay, Inko's motherly persistence led them all to the couch. To Izuku's horror, she opened a photo album and began, like most moms, to show off pictures of her child, explaining the story behind each one. She chatted animatedly with Tomura on her left, while Izuku on her right desperately tried to steer her attention elsewhere. I doubt he really is that interested. Izuku attempted to say politely, but Inko completely ignored him, engrossed in sharing tales about Izuku's 5th birthday, his first trick-or-treating experience, and the day he was accepted into UA. When she reached a picture of Izuku standing proudly by UA, which was likely from when he was accepted, Inko's eyes began to glisten with tears, much to the shock of both males beside her, even catching Tomura's attention. Mom? What's wrong? Izuku immediately asked, placing his hands on her shoulders. She sniffed, wiping her eyes and smiling weakly. I'm just glad that this wasn't the last picture I took of you, she said quietly, kissing her son's forehead. Last picture? Tomura thought to himself, but his musings were interrupted when Inko closed the photo album and smiled at both her son and him. She got up, happily placing the book back on the shelf, but then noticed the time. Is that the time already? Mura-san, do you have a way to get home? She asked curiously, glancing over her shoulder. Yeah. My feet, Tomura replied sarcastically, eliciting a small laugh from Inko. She placed a hand on her cheek. Oh, of course. But if you're planning on walking back and it's not too far, why not take Izuku with you? He always walks his friends home from school, and I would feel bad if you brought him all the way here only to walk back alone, she suggested, leaving Izuku wide-eyed on the couch. He was home. He was so close to getting rid of Tomura, but instead his mother had offered him up like some sort of escort. What? It's settled. Izuku dear, go get your shoes on while I give Mura-san some leftovers to take home. You can do the dishes another day. Izuku couldn't argue, as his mother had already made her way out of the living room and disappeared into the kitchen. He let out a long, tired sigh, his shoulders slumping. I don't need you to come with me. You'll just annoy me the entire way, and besides, I don't need you knowing my location to report to All Might or whatever, Tomura stated, breaking the silence as he stood up and walked over to the Genken to grab his shoes. He paused, almost picking up Izuku's shoes by mistake since they looked similar. Changing direction, he carefully picked up his own shoes. So stay here, he told Izuku, putting them on and opening the front door. But before Izuku could say anything, Inko returned, dragging the green-haired teen to the door and handing Tomura a small bento box wrapped in blue cloth. Here you go. You did such a good job helping, I thought you should have the rest, she said with a smile directed at the undercover villain. Izuku, I told you to get your shoes on, she fussed, causing Izuku to scramble to comply. Tomura accepted the box, watching carefully as Izuku came over to his side, ready to go. He knew he would get in trouble later. If he didn't, it was fine. He would probably just walk a short distance, like to the street, wait a while, then come back inside. Tomura would like that too, right? Most likely, Izuku thought. Just as Tomura and Izuku were heading out the door, someone grabbed Tomura's sleeve, causing him to glance back quickly. What is it? He asked, sounding snappy, but Inko didn't seem to notice or care. I just want you to know, as Izuku's mother, I'm very grateful to you, she said with a gentle smile. Tomura paused, then looked back at her. You see, Inko began. Izuku had been walking but stopped, noticing Tomura still at the door of his apartment, seemingly in conversation with his mother. He couldn't hear them and wasn't sure if he should move closer, so he stood a bit away, waiting. My son was kidnapped by the League of Villains not long ago. Right after he started attending UA. Inko told Shigaraki in a soft, saddened tone. It was clear that the memory still affected her, and she was trying not to cry. But something felt twisted in Tomura's chest. Hearing those words made him uncomfortable. I was so worried. Even though he's training to become a hero and will save people, I can't help but wonder. Who will protect him? Who will be my son's hero? She asked quietly, holding her hands to her chest. But I'm glad to know you exist because, if I may request of you, please protect my little boy. I know he's grown up, but he's still all I have, and he doesn't deserve any terrible villains to take him or take away his dreams. So please, Murasen, could you keep an eye out for him? She asked, looking up at him with pure hope. Tomura stood there, momentarily dumbfounded, but after a second. What are they talking about? What is Tomura nodding to? Izuku muttered to himself, furrowing his brows. God, I hope he's not up to anything. The student watched as Shigaraki turned to leave, walking down the staircase. What were you talking about? I have the right to know, Izuku stated suddenly as they exited the apartment complex. Tomura ignored him and continued walking, leaving Izuku uncertain of where they were headed. That I'll just ask her myself, you know, Izuku sighed to himself, tired of dealing with Tomura. The feeling was almost mutual between the two, they just didn't know it yet. Well, that's not important, so let's focus on Tomura, who paused for a moment and glanced over his shoulder. Just know one thing, he said, pulling down his hood with a weary hand and meeting Izuku's gaze. Their eyes locked, and it didn't take long for Tomura to speak again when he sensed Izuku was about to ask something. You're my hero, kid. You don't need to go around saving others. Be selfish. Do whatever you want and save yourself. The villain's voice trailed off into a low murmur as he broke eye contact and looked down. Did his statement carry a deeper meaning? Was this Tomura's way of conveying something to Izuku? A sharp twist in his chest signaled a growing sense of guilt. Taking Izuku for reasons yet to be revealed felt truly selfish. The apprentice of All for One realized he was feeling something, and as he recalled Inko's words, it became clear he felt guilt for taking Izuku away. And that realization began to weigh heavily on his heart. You're my hero, Brat. Those were the words he told Izuku just hours ago. The greenette couldn't sleep, and when he was on the verge of drifting off, Tomura's expression and words flooded his mind, causing Izuku's eyes to snap open once more. Could you blame him for being jumpy? Anyone would feel confused and anxious if the villain who had kidnapped them said something like that. Sure, those words could sound like a threat to anyone else, but the tone Tomura used when he said them was soft. Izuku muttered quietly to himself. His eyes stared hazily at the ceiling as he lay there, lost in thought for what felt like an eternity, trying to unravel the questions swirling in his mind. They were confusing, and honestly, Izuku couldn't even figure out what half of them were. Why did he feel so anxious all of a sudden? So confused? Why did Tomura tell him that? Why was he so adamant about not letting Izuku follow? Izuku thought it was just because Tomura was going to his headquarters, but there was something off about it. It felt like he shouldn't come, which only made the greenette more puzzled and curious. I need to stop this, Izuku told himself suddenly, sitting up. He cringed afterward, hoping he hadn't woken his mom by raising his voice in the middle of the night. I mean, why would he say that? It doesn't make sense. He said quietly, holding his chin as he thought seriously about it. It's okay to be selfish and save yourself. That's what Shigaraki told me. But I still don't get it. If anything, it sounded kind of like he was. Yen you to hell, Kurojairi, were Tomura's first words spoken that night when he returned to headquarters. To say the least, the blue-haired villain was not happy. He slammed the door open with enough force to turn the doorknob to dust. Looking around, he saw no sign of the usual teleportation criminal. He cursed under his breath and walked over to the bar, taking a seat at the counter and placing a bento box on the surface. He groaned, running a few fingers through his hair. Tomura was starting to regret what he had said earlier to Izuku before they parted ways. I'm going to deal with that BSE. Wow. Tomura-kun. You're finally back, shouted a voice suddenly, and there was you, climbing up onto the empty stool to Tomura's right. The blonde boy wore a red t-shirt that was oversized, probably a men's size. You had a smear of oil across his cheek and a few matching stains on the shirt that went down to his knees, making it look like a dress on him. He swung his legs back and forth, smiling brightly at Tomura, who sighed and folded his arms on the counter, looking down at the child beside him. For goodness sake, I told you not to call me that, he snapped, then turned his gaze ahead, lost in thought. However, you didn't flinch at the statement. He continued to smile up at him. All right, Shirkuin. Eh? Who told you that you could call me that? Tomura immediately turned his body and attention toward the smaller boy. You shook his head. Nobody, but I noticed Izuku calls you that at work. He explained. Though that didn't relax Tomura in the slightest. The villain held back the urge to silence this kid. That's his choice. Nobody said you could call me, but he was interrupted by you again. The boy pointed at the bento box, looking extremely curious. Sugoi. Did you bring food? He gasped, peering over at the covered box. Tomura sighed and pushed it in front of him. You can have it, he told you, whose eyes sparkled. Tomura rarely gave him anything. I can? Thanks. You exclaimed, sliding off his seat, running around to the other side of the bar, and returning with a fork in hand. He climbed back onto his seat beside Tomura, opening the box and beginning to dig in. After a while of silence, you looked back up at Tomura. Say, Tomura-kun, where were you all night? I was waiting forever. He commented, furrowing his light-colored brows. Tomura's red eyes glanced down at the kid, who was awaiting an answer. I was out. I told you to mind your own business, he muttered, resting his chin in his palm, his elbow propping him up. His gaze wandered to a few glasses air-drying on the counter a bit away from him. It's not worth mentioning to a kid like you anyway. Of course it is, you spoke up, placing a hand on Tomura's sleeve and clutching it lightly. Otherwise, you wouldn't be so bothered. He said matter-of-factly, wearing a smug, toothy grin that only that one obnoxiously confident kid in grade school could pull off. I thought we were friends, he pouted, giving Tomura an upset glare and puffing his cheeks. Bug off, Tomura rudely retorted, pulling his arm away. You looked back at the half-finished bento and began to play with his food with his fork. You don't have to be so grumpy, he mumbled, now looking upset, something Tomura didn't need. Fine. Stay up. Do whatever. Just stop making that stupid expression. Otherwise, Kurogiri will nag at me for upsetting you. Tomura gave in with a sigh. You two bother me so much. Why don't you just let him raise you? You both are annoying enough that I should just kick you out. His question was rhetorical, and his last statement was cold, but you immediately answered anyway as soon as the question came out. Because, he told him, putting both hands on Tomura's forearm. You're like my own dad, Tomura-kun. This caught even Tomura off guard. He didn't move and ended up listening to you explain. You didn't have to help me when I was alone. He trailed off quietly, looking down, his hands gripping the sleeve of Tomura's hoodie tightly. You said I was useful, even when I was told I wasn't because I had no quirk. He began to tear up, one hand letting go of Tomura. You wiped his eyes with his forearm as he cried and choked out quiet words. You said my mechanical skills were good enough. And even let me join your league. I was so happy. He sniffed, letting go of Tomura's arm with his last hand and bursting into tears, jumping forward to hug his arm. Please don't make me leave. What? The little boy wailed, sobbing loudly. Tomura inhaled. You know, you snot-nosed brat, I was just kidding. Take a joke and get off of me, he said, his tone softer than before. He gently pushed you away. And you have some food on your face. He reached down, brushing a piece of egg off Yu's chin before tossing it away. You really need to clean up, he remarked, eyeing the remnants on Yu's face. Go wash your face when you're done. With a sigh, the villain stood up and walked away, leaving you with a gentler expression, his eyes glistening but not shedding tears. He blinked and turned to watch Tomura leave. "Good night, Tomura-kun," he called softly, a mix of confusion and a smile on his face as he returned to his meal while Tomura opened the door to his office. "Yeah. Good night. Both of you," he muttered under his breath as he stepped out of Yu's view. A hazy summer day, that's how Tomura would describe the moment he first encountered Izuku. It was quiet, save for the distant sound of cicadas. The Japanese sun shone brightly, and everything felt blurred in memory now. Children played at a park across the street from where a blue-haired boy sat. He looked frail and worn, though he hadn't seen his reflection in ages. Despite his appearance, he was aware of the danger he posed. Sitting cross-legged, hands resting in his lap, his red eyes lazily followed the kids at play. He didn't make a move to join them. If he did, he feared he might unintentionally hurt one of them. Then the police, or worse, the heroes would arrive, and Tenko would be cast aside once more. Isn't it ironic how several heroes passed by a young boy, alone and hurting, dirty and exhausted, without a second glance? Not that Tenko would have accepted their help anyway. Perhaps he might have once, but he had learned to despise them too deeply. Being alone had given him clarity, even at just 10 years old. He understood that heroes were just as flawed as the rest of the world. They were frauds, all of them. They pretended to be paragons of hope, especially that one guy. It was sickening. They acted as if they were above everyone else, yet Tenko was living proof of their hypocrisy. For a while, Tenko observed a group of kids bullying another boy. The victim had green hair and appeared to be 2 or 3 years younger than him, but from a distance, it was hard to make out his features. Eventually, the bullies left, and the green-haired boy was left alone, tears streaming down his face in a sandbox. Tenko felt no sympathy. Perhaps this boy would finally understand that trying to be a hero was futile. That notion was merely a false idea. People acted for their own gain, seeking power and status. He deserved it, he muttered under his breath, watching the boy from afar. Days passed, and Tenko didn't see the green-haired boy again. Then he spotted him once more, and again the next day. Eventually, he realized this boy must have a routine. He came to the park after school, likely waiting for his parents to return from work. As Tenko observed, he noticed the boy cried often. A blonde kid seemed to pick on him regularly, but Tenko didn't care enough to find out why. Once, he saw a woman with matching green hair come to the park. She left with the boy, so she must have been his mother, Tenko figured. They walked away hand in hand, and Tenko watched, feeling a strange warmth at the sight of their connection, a bond that made parents lead their beloved children, filling them with safety and love. "Hey, are you okay?" "Huh." Looking up, Tenko's red eyes met those of the boy who cried often. He hadn't expected to see him up close. The boy had big, bright green eyes like jungle green marbles and soft skin dotted with freckles. He seemed curious and confused about why Tenko was sitting alone. "Sorry. Thought you were hurt." "Why are you alone?" he asked, crouching down in front of Tenko. Instinctively, Tenko moved his hands away from his lap, placing them beside him, further from the other boy. "If you want, you can play with me. My mom will be here soon," he offered cheerfully, gripping the straps of his school backpack as he waited for a response. "Does he think I'm waiting for my parents too?" Tenko thought, staring at him for a moment. "Sorry. I don't want to," he replied bluntly, expecting the boy to give up. But for some reason he didn't. "Oh, sorry. That's fine. Maybe next time," he rambled, still crouching beside Tenko, who suddenly moved back. "Don't come near me," he shouted, startling the green-haired boy. Tenko panted, feeling himself grow agitated. He looked away, clenching his teeth, his hair obscuring his expression. "Just go away," he mumbled. After a few moments, the green-haired boy spoke up. I am Izuku Midoriya," he introduced himself, feeling a bit embarrassed. He hesitated, unsure if he should leave Tenko alone, but it felt wrong to abandon him. Could I wait here until my mom comes back?" Izuku asked, uncertain but remembering his mother's lessons about not leaving others alone. Before Tenko could respond, Izuku rummaged through his backpack. Tenko watched as Izuku pulled out a package of chewy candy. "Here," Izuku offered, holding out the open package, which was light green indicating it was probably green apple flavored. My mom bought them for me this morning, he explained, smiling and waiting for Tenko to take one. Knowing Izuku likely wouldn't take no for an answer, Tenko relented and carefully took a piece of candy from the package. He began to unwrap it but paused when he noticed Izuku staring at his hands. What? He snapped, causing Izuku to flinch. Sorry. I was just wondering. Do you need help? Izuku asked, noticing the awkward way Tenko was trying to open the candy. He wasn't sure what was wrong, but he extended his hand, ready to assist. Tenko grumbled but eventually handed the candy over. Izuku eagerly opened it and placed it in Tenko's palm, putting the wrapper back in his backpack. What's your name? He asked as Tenko popped the candy into his mouth. Just then, someone called Izuku's name, and he looked over his shoulder to see his mother across the road, likely worried about not finding him where he was supposed to be waiting. My mom. She's probably worried, he said to himself, glancing back at Tenko. I gotta go, but I'll see you again, okay? He promised, placing the package of haichus on the ground in front of the other boy. Izuku turned to leave quickly but paused when he heard someone call out. Wait, the other boy said, hesitating as if unsure whether to reach out. Why yeah? Izuku asked, his big green eyes filled with curiosity. For a moment, neither boy expected a response. But then he spoke. After a few seconds, he said quietly, Shimura. Tenko Shimura. That's my name. His gaze fell to the candy on the ground. Don't forget to come back, Tenko added softly. I won't. Izuku's eyes sparkled with excitement. A new friend? He was thrilled. We'll see each other real soon. I promise. He tapped his chin, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. Shimura. Izuku repeated quietly, then gave Tenko a cheerful smile. I'll call you Shirkuin. Suddenly, Tomura jolted awake, sitting up and breathing heavily. He pressed a hand to his forehead, eyes closed. It must have been a nightmare. Not that it mattered. He had only slept for a few hours since returning from Izuku's. The villain sat in his bed, his heart racing. Why did that flashback upset him so much? Cold sweat trickled down his face, and a tear slipped down his cheek, though he would deny it even to himself. Midoriya. You stupid liar, he muttered, clenching his teeth and tugging at his hair, taking a deep breath. Don't keep promises you can't keep. Chapter 17. Why did I decide to kidnap Izuku Midoriya? If you've been paying attention, you might think it's because I want to impress my master or make him proud. I guess that's partially true. I'm loyal to him. After all, he's the one who took me in. But no, this story has nothing to do with him. He isn't my motivation for getting involved with Midoriya. My reasons are known to me alone. Chapter 18. Chapter 19. Chapter 20. What do you mean you forgot? The festival is in 2 weeks, you idiot. With that, Shigaraki smacked Izuku lightly on the head. Shigaraki had been doing his usual routine, helping Izuku stay in shape by pushing him to run as if his life depended on it. They also ensured Izuku maintained other daily habits to be in the best possible condition for the upcoming 2 weeks. Izuku was surprised by how much effort Tomura had been putting into this, but together, they worked hard, tracking Izuku's progress and creating a workout schedule leading up to the UA Sports Festival. However, Izuku, who was personally affected by all this and busy with school, had lost track of how much time was left until the festival and was currently being scolded by Shigaraki. I'm sorry. It's just hard to focus on my classes and this. I've been overworking and it's making me tired. Izuku admitted. This caused Shigaraki to raise an eyebrow and glare at him. Really? He said, staring Izuku dead in the eye. How do you figure? The plan we made was perfect unless you're saying I messed up. His tone was low, and he didn't seem pleased with the idea of Izuku blaming his tiredness on him. Izuku quickly shook his head, denying it. It's not you, he promised. Then why are you so out of it? I've been. Izuku trailed off, rubbing the back of his neck and avoiding eye contact. You see, All Might has been giving me some pointers, and I've been training extra based on his suggestions. He doesn't want to treat me differently from the other contestants, but he did mention some places that would be good for different kinds of exercise. He didn't even finish before Shigaraki was suddenly inches away from his face, breathing heavily. "So, you've been training with the #1 hero, huh?" he whispered, a growl in his voice. Izuku felt a chill run down his spine. He sensed Shigaraki was not pleased. In a moment of instinct, he tried to dart around him to escape, but Shigaraki was quicker, grabbing Izuku by the hoodie of his shirt. Izuku yelped in surprise. "Where do you think you're going?" Tomura asked in a hushed, dark tone, dragging Izuku out of the park. Had been there for a few hours, allowing Izuku to do a few last running laps before this conversation started. As they walked down the sidewalk through downtown, Tomura seemed to have a destination in mind. Izuku struggled to break free, but he was aware that drawing attention from passers-by could lead to unwanted questions. Eventually, he reluctantly followed along, his hoodie still in Tomura's grip, acting as a sort of leash. Hey, Tomura. Where are we going?" Izuku asked, feeling confused and tired. He was panting slightly and Tomura noticed. "Shut it," he replied, glancing over his shoulder. He saw Izuku's tired face, still flushed from all the running, with beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. The sound of Tomura's heart suddenly thudded in his chest. Why did he feel so flustered all of a sudden? He quickly looked away from Izuku, who seemed blissfully unaware, and his gaze caught sight of an ice cream shop. Annoyed with himself for even thinking of it, he headed toward the pink and white building. "Hey Brat, come on." He gave Izuku an extra tug as he pulled him inside the shop. For Izuku, it felt like entering heaven. The cool air washed over his warm, sweaty body, and he sighed with relief, standing there like a happy little dork, enjoying the AC and forgetting about the ice cream. "What are you doing?" Tomura questioned, unable to understand why Izuku was just standing there, looking dazed. He approached the counter to order something, but Izuku was being his usual self, so Tomura took quick strides back to him. He shook Izuku's shoulder lightly, causing his big green eyes to open wide. "It feels so nice in here. What do you want?" Tomura interrupted, gesturing toward the front counter and the menu. He was growing impatient. Izuku seemed taken aback. "What do I want?" The idea of Tomura Shigaraki offering to buy him ice cream had never crossed his mind. "Damn it. You really are clueless." "Never mind." Tomura began to walk around Izuku, but this time, Izuku instinctively reached out and grabbed the back of Tomura's hoodie. It wasn't a planned action, just a reflex. Even Izuku couldn't quite understand it. "Did you want to get some ice cream, Shirkuin?" he asked hesitantly. Tomura stared at him, momentarily speechless, then looked away. "I only came here because you were tired and complaining about wanting to sit down. If you think I would want some sappy ice cream, then you obviously don't know me," he muttered, hiding his face under his hood. Izuku had learned that Tomura did this when he was pouting or upset, but not enough to lash out. Izuku stared at him, then tugged the back of Tomura's hoodie gently to get his attention. "Strawberry," he said quietly, a light blush dancing across his freckled cheeks. "Strawberry ice cream sounds nice." He looked up at Tomura for approval, who grunted and pulled away from Izuku as if he were trying to shake off a pesky bug, then walked up to the counter. "Hey, Tomura. Shut it. We're in public." Tomura snapped back as he sat down across from Izuku. They were in a booth by a window facing the bustling downtown streets. Izuku stared at the treat in front of him, a dessert Tomura had ordered. It was a delightful concoction of strawberry swirls, pieces of dark red fruit, and a soft pink base topped with whipped cream and thinly sliced strawberries, all adorned with colorful sprinkles. Izuku was taken aback that someone like Tomura would get him something so visually appealing. Tomura was glaring coldly out the window, but his sharp red eyes flicked over to Izuku when he noticed the staring. Izuku felt a chill in the air, as if the ice cream shop had suddenly turned colder. He gulped and looked down, shivering slightly. This was the guy who brought him this treat. Why is he being so nice to me? Ever since he left my place that night, he's been acting a little off, Izuku thought, drifting into his own mind. I can't let my guard down. Maybe he's just pretending. I need to stay focused until I have a plan to fix this mess. Why aren't you eating it? Tomura suddenly asked, folding his arms on the table and leaning forward, causing Izuku to lean back. Isn't that the kind you wanted? Don't be a picky brat and not eat what's given to you. Fine. Izuku muttered. He quickly picked up his spoon and took a bite, only to be hit with a sudden brain freeze. Brain freeze? Tomura groaned, sliding his hand down his face. This kid was really hopeless. Hold your tongue against the top of your mouth, he instructed, reaching over to gently hold Izuku's cheeks. This only made Izuku freeze up even more, and he was sure the brain freeze was starting to hurt more. His face felt stuck. Tomura didn't like that and shook his head back and forth like a bobblehead. Come on. For goodness sake. Just open your mouth so I can see if you're even listening. He kept shaking Izuku's head until the hero in training reluctantly opened his mouth a bit and pressed his tongue against the roof of his mouth as instructed, avoiding eye contact. He suddenly felt something. Being this close to the villain always made him anxious, but it was that strange feeling he had back in the restroom at the park when he changed in front of Tomura, a rush in his heartbeat, his palms felt clammy, and he almost felt lightheaded. You can let go now, Izuku said with a frown, pulling his face out of Tomura's grasp and looking away. Tomura blinked. Did he really just get told to let go? He didn't like that at all. Not one bit. After a few minutes of awkward silence, awkward enough that Izuku couldn't eat his ice cream because the only noise would be the sound of him eating, he heard the jingle of the door as a new customer entered. He glanced over his shoulder and his eyes widened when he saw who it was. Shoto Todoroki. Izuku quickly turned away, covering his mouth to stifle a loud gasp. What's he doing here? If he sees me with Tomura, he could get suspicious, and then I'll have to come up with an excuse. What if I involve Todoroki with my problem? He could get hurt. I can't involve anyone else like I did with Mom. Tomura seemed to read Izuku's reaction. His eyes scanned the area until he spotted the red and white-haired teenager, recognizing him from their previous encounter at the arcade. He looked back at Izuku, who had ducked under the table. You weirdo. What are you doing? He asked with a raspy sigh. Izuku didn't respond, too focused on how to escape without being seen. He had his eyes shut, trying to think. How could he get out of here? Without Todoroki noticing? He had to pass him on the way out, and it seemed his classmate was standing by the door, engrossed in his phone. Could he just bolt? No, that would look suspicious. He needed to think of something. Midoriya. He saw me. Izuku looked up, but it wasn't Todoroki. It was Tomura. It took Izuku a moment to realize why Tomura looked different. He had taken off the black hoodie he usually wore in public. For what? Wasn't it dangerous for him to be so exposed? Put this on and hurry up. Something was tossed into Izuku's hands, which he scrambled to catch. He held the worn-out piece of clothing, still warm from Tomura's body heat, staring at it in disbelief. He took it off. But he'll attract attention if anyone recognizes him. Izuku thought in shock, yet another thought struck him. Is he risking his identity for mine? After Izuku quickly pulled on the hoodie and casually emerged from beneath the table, he noticed that Tomura had already left. He guessed that Tomura had gone outside. It made sense. Izuku hurriedly walked out of the shop, relieved that he didn't think Todoroki had noticed him, thanks to the oversized hoodie and hood that obscured his face. However, he rushed out so quickly that he couldn't be entirely sure. Shin-kun, he called out, looking around but not seeing him. Izuku began to pace up and down the street when he spotted Tomura lingering in the alleyway between the ice cream shop and another store. He quickly made his way over. Dada. What should Izuku say? He stumbled over his words, panicking to think of a response before Tomura grew impatient. You see, he trailed off, scratching his cheek and glancing awkwardly to the side. Did your mother never teach you manners? Tomura interjected, clicking his tongue and gazing up at the sky, which was darkening with the approaching sunset. Huh? Izuku looked up at him, the taller figure looking down in return. I said, did she not teach you any manners? I can't stand people who lack respect, he stated seriously, crossing his arms. As she did. Then where is my thank you? Izuku paused, finally understanding what Tomura meant. Tomura scoffed. To think I risked being spotted by a pro or a cop just so you could be rude. You really are a pain. I almost feel bad for your mother. I bet she received an apology letter instead of a birth certificate from the hospital after having someone like you. He turned to walk around Izuku, muttering, "Stuck-up heroes," under his breath. Thank you, Shigaraki. Tomura glanced down at Izuku, who had followed him. Their eyes met. Sorry. My mom did teach me manners. And I don't think she would be very pleased if I didn't say thank you for helping me, he confessed, sounding more mature as he spoke clearly. He took a breath and bowed his head slightly as a sign of gratitude. Thank you again, Tomura Shigaraki. Tomura stared for a moment before looking away. You're welcome, Izuku Midoriya. Was that? Todoroki trailed off as he watched the figure in the black hoodie rush out of the ice cream shop. He was sure that when he followed Izuku with that hooded figure, the person had been much taller than the one who just left. However, it was the person who passed him first that made the UA student more concerned. He resembled the villain Todoroki had seen at the USJ. The one who took Izuku, he muttered coldly, gripping his fist as frost began to creep up his arm and under his sleeve. He exhaled, his breath visible in the air. If Izuku thought it felt colder in the shop with one of Tomura's stares, the look on Todoroki's face made the store feel like it had dropped at least 20 degrees. It had been 3 days since Shoto had seen Izuku and his companion at the ice cream shop downtown. The clues were there, yet Shoto still felt like he was missing something important. What was the key to solving this puzzle? He had been pondering it ever since he saw those two together. If that person was indeed the one who had kidnapped Izuku, then it was no coincidence they were at the same place. And knowing that Izuku had been wearing the villain's hoodie added another layer of mystery. Did the villain give it to him? That was a question for later. Being the straightforward person he was, Shoto decided he would simply ask Izuku about it. He preferred to get directly to the point. One café latte for Todoroki-san. Izuku exclaimed, surprised to see his classmate here of all places. Did Shoto discover that this was the coffee shop where Izuku worked? He couldn't think of any other reason for someone like Shoto to be at his humble establishment. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly after setting down the latte, offering a small smile. Sorry. I wasn't expecting to see you here. Is everything all right? Todoroki stared at him for a moment, an intense gaze that lingered. Then the handsome young man leaned against his fist, his multicolored eyes never leaving Izuku. I didn't know you worked here, he remarked, causing Izuku to flinch slightly. Izuku started, scratching his head nervously. I haven't worked here long. Just a bit after I returned to school. He explained. However, Todoroki raised an eyebrow. Isn't that a bit reckless, starting a job so far from school right after you came back? He asked, sounding unconvinced. Midoriya gulped, fiddling with the tray he was holding. I, needed a distraction, he admitted, feeling guilty for lying. Although he and Todoroki weren't that close, he still felt bad about it. He didn't think Shoto was a bad person. If anything, he admired Shoto's determination to win the festival, even if he came off as a bit passive-aggressive, making his classmates uneasy. At least Bakugo was upfront about his aggression, while Shoto was quieter about it. I see, was Shoto's response as he didn't even touch his latte. He sat there for a moment, his hands resting in his lap. Izuku thought this might be his chance to leave, glancing behind him as he began to walk away. Enjoy your lot. Let me know if you need any. Tell me, Midoriya. Shoto said suddenly in a lower tone, causing Izuku to freeze in place. The greenette looked over his shoulder, his heart sinking when he saw the expression on Todoroki's face. His breath caught in his throat as Shoto asked, Who were you with 3 days ago at the ice cream parlor? The question that came out of Shoto's mouth was not one Izuku had ever hoped to hear. The smaller boy felt his knees begin to buckle, his skin turned clammy, and his heart seemed to drop into his stomach. Anxiety washed over him, leaving him feeling nauseated. His only reason for hiding anything was to protect his number one hero and All Might's secret. That was all. What other reason could Izuku have for concealing the truth about Tomura Shigaraki blackmailing him? He tried to swallow the dry lump in his throat, but it wouldn't budge. A drop of sweat slipped down his forehead as he struggled to maintain a poker face in front of his classmate. That was all he could do right now. I don't really understand what you mean, Todoroki-kun. What are you? Midoriya. Shoto said Izuku's name like a warning. The greenette glanced out of the corner of his eye and froze. Dabi was watching them from behind the counter. If Dabi finds out Todoroki-kun knows, then Todoroki-kun will be in danger for sure, Izuku thought as he slowly sat in the chair across from Shoto at the small table. He needed to make this look as unremarkable as possible, so he tried to keep his shaking to a minimum. After all, Dabi was part of the league and would surely side with them over Izuku and Shoto. The two colored-haired teens still hadn't even touched his lot. Izuku assumed Shoto hadn't come here for coffee. This only made him feel more anxious. And he should be. Todoroki was starting to piece this puzzle together, and those deep red eyes he had seen them before. Back at the attack on the USJ. Shoto wanted answers from Izuku, but Izuku didn't know what to say. Shoto could tell. This was fine. He came here to ask questions. All he wanted from Izuku was answers. But why was Shoto so serious about uncovering the truth his classmate was hiding? They were rivals in the upcoming sports festival and not even friends. So he shouldn't care. And he didn't. He just didn't want his class's reputation torn to shreds because of whatever mess Izuku Midoriya was in. That was all. He leaned in over the table closer to the other boy. I can't force answers out of you, he whispered. Wait, did he know that Izuku was more willing to listen because Dabi was watching from across the cafe? Maybe. Or perhaps it was because Shoto's low tone made him seem even colder. Izuku felt a shiver run down his spine. This was nerve-wracking. He could barely stand it. But if Shoto wouldn't force him to say anything, then maybe. But I can find a way to convince you if I have to, Midoriya, he added, shattering any hope Izuku had of escaping this. This is serious if villains are involved. He tried to explain, but Izuku already knew all of this. All it would take was one minor or major slip-up, like telling Shoto, and Tomura could find out. If he did, All Might's secret would be exposed, and everyone, even the villains of this world, would know about it. Izuku would have failed the duty entrusted to him by his hero, the one he had admired since childhood, the one who had given Izuku a chance to follow his dreams. Why now? Why is he so insistent? The greenette played with his thumbs under the table. This wasn't looking good. He could either confess everything or keep it secret, but Todoroki wouldn't give up easily, and Izuku might only worsen things by hiding the truth. But I have the chance to tell him. To tell someone. That's what I want, to unburden myself with this weight on my chest, to seek help with this entire situation, and defeat the League with this hold they have on me, but... Izuku felt so hesitant. Midoriya, if it's that bad, then you should tell me. I can't. Todoroki seemed taken aback by that answer. Izuku's tone was firm. If I tell you, it'll only put you and everyone I care about in danger. Todoroki-kun, I'm sorry. I want to. I do. But... Izuku sighed and took a breath. He looked Shoto in the eye. But I really can't right now. Not until I have a better idea of how to deal with this on my own. For a while, both boys were silent. Then Shoto held the bridge of his nose as he, too, sighed. He kept his gaze averted from Izuku. Do you really not trust your classmates that much? He muttered. His face started to warm. But he didn't know, but his chest felt tight. You know, the others, they've all been so worried about you. You're all that's ever on their minds nowadays, he confessed quietly. His blue and gray eyes glanced back up at Izuku, then back down. It was hard to look at him feeling like this. Maybe they're willing to risk the chance of endangering themselves if it means they can understand you better and what is going on. Shoto's words, whether meant to be as genuine as they sounded or not, made Izuku tear up. This caused Shoto's eyes to widen as he began to mentally panic. He hadn't meant to make Izuku cry. Was it really that bad? Only fueling Shoto's anger toward the villain who had started all this, the one who had kidnapped Izuku. Todoroki-kun. Izuku mumbled as he wiped one of his glossy eyes, but the tears wouldn't stop easily. Midoriya. Who are you? Tomura's cold voice interrupted, suddenly standing behind Izuku and glaring down at him, red eyes like a hawk as he stared down the ice and fire quirk-powered hero trainee. Tomura had come here to relieve stress, but then he saw this. Izuku, whom he had been agitated to see at first since his discussion with Kurogiri, crying, and this guy Tomura, obvious by his deadly expression, was blaming Shoto for the tears. This was not good, because Izuku couldn't hide his tears for Shoto's now endangered life. Though he did hold back a gasp upon seeing the leader of the league here out of nowhere, Izuku never got the chance to ask Tomura what he was doing there because Tomura slammed a fist on the table, startling Izuku, though Shoto didn't flinch. The glare Tomura was giving Izuku's classmate was not one-sided. It only took Todoroki a moment to gather his senses. That was definitely the guy. Tomura's face was not one hard to remember. Tomura leaned over, his face coming closer to Shoto, his eyes wide with frustration. "And why is my employee crying?" "Izuku." "Mura-kun." Inko called out as she entered the living room, carrying a large red tray filled with plates, treats, mugs, and candies. She set it down on the kotatsu where Izuku and his villain partner were sitting, a thick blanket draped over their laps to keep them warm. Izuku wore a green woolly sweater, while Tomura sported a blue one that Inko had made for both boys. Tomura had protested wearing it, but Izuku had convinced him. "What's up with the cookies?" Izuku exclaimed suddenly, having taken a bite and realizing they weren't shaped like snowmen, Christmas trees, or even snowflakes. "Aren't they adorable?" Inko asked, offering another hand-shaped cookie to her son after giving one to Tomura. "Mura-kun helped me make them. He's such a sweet young man." She smiled approvingly. Inko always loved Izuku's friends, but the greenette couldn't help but find the irony in Tomura being one of them, especially given his reputation. Despite Tomura's villainous nature, Izuku had wanted him to come over. Over time, he had learned to see beyond Tomura's darker traits, hoping to show him a better way. In return, Izuku had gained a new perspective on the world through Tomura's eyes. "Brat, why aren't you eating the cookies?" Tomura's raspy voice broke Izuku out of his thoughts, snapping his attention back to him. Izuku smiled nervously, knowing that Tomura often took offense when he didn't eat his cooking. While Tomura had initially struggled in the kitchen, Inko had been teaching him over the time they had known each other. But now, Tomura was glaring at him, prompting Izuku to smile back. "Don't worry, Shirkuin." He took a bite. "See? He coughed, having taken too big of a bite, and began to choke. Thankfully, Inko rushed over with a mug of hot chocolate to help him wash it down, likely needed due to the peculiar taste of the cookies, which Tomura had contributed to. "Izuku honey, I've told you about eating too fast," his mother exclaimed, giving him a gentle pat on the back. "Mura-kun, can you please help him while I get something easier for him to eat?" she asked as she hurried back to the kitchen. Izuku felt like a child, but before he could assure her he was fine, Tomura was smiling mischievously beside him under the kotatsu. "Don't worry, Miss Midoriya. I'll gladly help him," Tomura said, his tone playful. Izuku's eyes widened in alarm. He tried to escape, but Tomura had already wrapped an arm around his waist. "Wait." Izuku whispered urgently. "Why you're not wearing the gloves I made you?" He noticed Tomura had taken them off. Was he planning something dangerous? The green-haired boy squirmed but paused when he realized Tomura wasn't harming him. Instead, Tomura brushed his thumb over Izuku's lips. "I can't feel you with those gloves on," he murmured, caressing Izuku's lips and cheek. His skin was cold, yet somehow comforting. Izuku's emerald eyes glanced up to find Tomura's face so close to his. He instinctively reached for something on the table and held a small green branch above their heads. Tomura grimaced. "Why is that smelly plant in my face?" He was much taller, making it difficult for Izuku to hold it up. Izuku's face flushed a deep red. It's weight, you don't know what, never mind." He shook his head, biting his lip as he looked down. "I wanted to say Merry Christmas, Tomura," he mumbled quietly. The brief silence felt like an eternity for Izuku, who finally looked up to tell Tomura to forget his awkward gesture. Instead, he was met with Tomura's lips on his. Izuku's mind went blank, but he quickly leaned in, returning the kiss. Of course I know what you were trying to do, waving that branch around like a fool, Tomura retorted after pulling away. Do you really need mistletoe to have the courage to kiss me? He asked, a skeptical glare in his eyes. Izuku blinked, too dazed to care about Tomura's snappy attitude. Instead, he hugged him tightly, burying his face in Tomura's shoulder. Sorry. I was nervous, he admitted with a small smile, feeling fidgety. Tomura paused, caught off guard by the unexpected hug. After a moment, he gently patted Izuku's back to get his attention. When Izuku looked up, Tomura pressed his forehead against his and whispered just for him to hear, "Merry Christmas, you brat." Izuku smiled, closing his eyes and wrapping his arms around Tomura's neck. "Merry Christmas, Tomura. Is it finished?" "Kid, I'm talking to you." Tomura muttered, annoyance clear in his voice as he flicked Yu's forehead. The villain and his younger apprentice were in the villain's headquarters, oblivious to Izuku's situation with Shoto. Tomura was impatiently waiting for his walkie-talkie to be fixed. It had been malfunctioning for days, and he had Yu working on it. Not that the kid had a choice, but he complied willingly. "Oh, Kurogiri-san. He hurt me." Yu whined, dropping his tools, which accidentally landed on Tomura's foot. A shout of pain escaped Tomura as he grabbed his foot and cursed, only to be teleported across the room by Kurogiri. "Master Shigaraki, please refrain from using such language around children," Kurogiri said calmly, continuing to clean the counter after handing Yu a glass of root beer. He tidied up the smallest spots, keeping Tomura out of trouble during his free time. "Come on. Only against that kid," Tomura retorted, his voice rising. "I've heard how you speak to Midoriya," Kurogiri replied. "He's not a child." "Then what is he to you, Master Shigaraki?" Kurogiri asked, glancing up from his work. For a moment, Tomura seemed taken aback. He bit his lip, muttering a curse too harsh to say aloud, and turned away. "Is that why you call him names like Brat? Are you trying to convince yourself you see him like you and everyone else?" Kurogiri pressed, but Tomura tried to ignore him, clenching his fists and gritting his teeth. "If I may ask, what category do you place Izuku Midoriya in?" Kurogiri inquired. Before he could finish, Tomura slammed his hands on the counter, causing the polished wood to rot away. Malice radiated from him as he seethed with anger. "Listen, Kurogiri. Just stick to cleaning this sorry excuse for a hideout. Stay out of this." "Just shut up," he ordered, slamming his hands down again. The wood splintered, sending debris flying. Breathing heavily, Tomura turned his back on Kurogiri and Yu, storming out the front door and disintegrating the doorknob as he left. "Tell me, why was the villain who was part of the USJ attack with you the other day?" "Izuku Midoriya. What is it you're hiding?" The tension between Tomura and Shoto was palpable, their malice filling the air as they locked eyes in a brief stare-down. Izuku found himself caught in the middle, glancing nervously between them. One thought he had made Izuku cry, while the other sensed something troubling between Izuku and the villain. Shoto was determined to intervene. "Todoroki-kun." Izuku stammered, unsure of how to defuse the situation. He knew that any wrong move could spark a confrontation. Taking a deep breath, he stood up and stretched out his arms, trying to create a barrier between Shoto and Tomura. "Enough. Todoroki-kun, it's not worth it." If Shoto engaged with the leader of the League of Villains, he stood no chance. He was unaware that the cafe was filled with other villains who could easily overpower him. "If you do anything, you're going to get hurt." He hesitated to reveal Dabi and Toga's identities, knowing they were just behind Shoto, ready to act if he posed a threat. "How cute." Tomura chuckled, casually wrapping his arms around Izuku. A kid standing up for another kid. His red eyes met Shoto's intense gaze, and Izuku felt the temperature drop dramatically. "Ha! I'm Izuku Midoriya's boss and friend," he introduced nonchalantly, extending a hand. "What are you doing, Shigaraki?" Izuku thought, feeling uneasy. Shoto's dislike for the villain's casual demeanor around Izuku grew. He clenched his fists, frustrated. He wasn't allowed to use his quirk without a license, but the thought of protecting his classmate from a pro-villain was becoming more tempting. As Tomura continued to taunt him, Shoto weighed his options, ready to act if necessary. You'd be surprised how close we are. Even his mom loves me. Shigaraki, stop it. Todoroki, don't listen to him. He's just trying to provoke you. Ah, did he ever give you a nickname? Izuku felt a wave of panic wash over him. He couldn't figure out how to make Tomura stop without escalating the situation into a fight that he and Shoto would be outmatched in. Anger bubbled up inside him as Tomura began to not only humiliate him but also Todoroki. Tomura flashed Shoto a wide grin and spoke in his raspy voice. He calls me Shirkuin. What does he call you? I bet you two still use formal honorifics. Shut up. Izuku's fist connected with Tomura's face, creating an opening for him to break free from the villain's grip. He quickly stepped back, keeping his eyes locked on Shigaraki. Todoroki seemed to snap out of his daze when he saw Izuku pull away. Izuku was breathing heavily, overwhelmed with emotion. For a moment, silence hung in the air. It felt like an eternity, but it was only a few long seconds. Finally, the look in Izuku's eyes made Shoto relax and let out a sigh. Time to go. He stood up suddenly. Izuku sighed in relief until Shoto grabbed his wrist, causing his breath to hitch. And you're coming with me. Shoto's voice was quiet but firm. There was no way he was leaving Izuku with the villain who had kidnapped him and left him in such a miserable state for weeks. Even Bakugo had felt sorry for Izuku. Not again. Todoroki would never let Izuku be trapped with these villains. Todoroki pulled Izuku close, and in a moment that felt almost slow motion, the greenette found himself leaning against Shoto's chest. Todoroki wrapped an arm around him, keeping one hand ready to unleash his ice if necessary. Izuku was too stunned to react, his cheeks flushing from the unexpected closeness. Before he could gather his thoughts, Todoroki turned to face Tomura. Midoriya is leaving this place. Don't you dare come after him again, or you'll regret it. Todoroki threatened coldly, a chill spreading across the right side of his body, causing Izuku to shiver slightly. But the warmth of his embarrassment kept him from feeling too cold. Izuku had never seen such a protective side of Todoroki before. Todoroki began to lead him swiftly out of the cafe. Maybe it wasn't such a bad thing that Shoto found out. Izuku felt like the burden of the villain's blackmail was no longer solely his to bear. Perhaps he could share everything with Shoto, and together they could find a solution. Izuku just needed to skip the part about one for all. He felt worthless enough knowing that Tomura was already aware of it. How had he found out? As the bells chimed when they exited, Tomura remained still, holding his bruised cheek, which was beginning to swell. That brat. Tomura's eyes widened as he watched Izuku and Todoroki disappear from sight. Never even looked back. Master Tomura. That's enough alcohol. Kurojairi sighed, taking the empty bottle from Tomura's hand. He knew that whenever his master drank, he became irritable and unpredictable. Kurojairi also understood that it was in Tomura's best interest to avoid a hangover while leading the league. Tomura sat at the bar, his fingers twitching with frustration. He wanted to destroy something, but he had run out of Kurojairi's dishware, leaving only dust on the counter for Kurojairi to clean up. Can you believe that, you brat? That little punk. He never even glanced back at me. Tomura shouted, slamming his fists onto the countertop, causing silverware to rattle and fall to the floor. After everything I've done to help him prepare for that stupid festival, he hurled a bottle at the wall, shattering it into pieces. Who does he think he is? Kurojairi had to keep dodging as Tomura threw things around in a fit of rage. This was going to be a long night. Master Tomura. You already told me everything that happened 2 hours ago. Perhaps you should go and apologize if you miss that young hero so much. Of course, Kurojairi knew that idea would never work, and he sighed as Tomura stormed off, nearly giving any of the other villains he passed a heart attack. Silently, all the league members agreed on one thing: to leave Tomura alone until he calmed down. Chapter 24. After everything that had happened, the attack on the USJ, being kidnapped, missing his classes, worrying about his mother, and even the sacred promise he made with all might, Izuku Midoriya felt a weight lift off his chest now that someone he trusted knew what he had been hiding all these weeks. Shoto seemed to understand. That night, Izuku and Shoto talked about it in class after their classmates left for the day. Being at UA made Izuku feel safer discussing everything. So, Shoto began after Izuku finished recounting his experiences, from his kidnapping to the present. He didn't mention one for all, only that Tomura Shigaraki knew a valuable secret about one of the pro-heroes, and if it got out, it could have devastating consequences. You've been under Shigaraki's influence all this time? Todoroki clarified, and Izuku nodded solemnly. That's right, he replied. Shoto fell silent. You mentioned that Shigaraki wants something at this school that the principal has? And you were supposed to spy on the teachers to find it? That seems like a poorly thought-out plan, especially since he didn't even tell you what to look for, Shoto commented, deep in thought. He glanced back at Izuku, who looked extremely nervous, clutching his fists and sweating. Shoto studied him for a moment. You don't need to worry. I won't tell anyone, he assured. Izuku paused, sighed, and offered Shoto a weak smile. Thanks, Todoroki-kun. The upcoming sports festival was just 3 days away. It was hard to believe how quickly time had passed, and Izuku could feel the anxiety and nervousness building within him. He had been training hard and preparing himself, but thanks to Shoto, things in his private life seemed to be getting clearer. Having someone aware of his situation helped ease some of the burden, but a nagging thought lingered in the back of his mind. Since his last encounter with Tomura over a week ago, Izuku had been able to focus more on school, hero training, and even spend more time with his classmates and friends. Perhaps he was hoping that Tomura had given up on him, that the whole blackmail situation was over, but Izuku wasn't naive enough to believe that. He knew he would eventually find out what Tomura was up to. Izuku? Honey, I'm going to the store and have to run a few errands. Will you be okay alone for a while? Inko asked, peeking her head into his room. Izuku was studying at his desk but paused to smile back at her. Yeah, I'll be fine, Mom. Don't worry, he promised. Then he remembered he had a library book that needed to be returned today. Asking his mom to hold on a moment, Izuku scrambled to search through his school bag and handed her the book. After exchanging goodbyes, Izuku looked down to close his bag, but something caught his eye. The communicator, which was also partly a tracking device that Tomura had given him. For a moment, Izuku stared at it as if he had never seen it before. Then he gritted his teeth, grabbed the device, and pulled back his arm as if he were going to throw it. But he stopped himself, sighed, and looked at the communicator. His fingers hovered over the button that turned it on. Did it even still work? He hadn't received any messages from the League in a while. If it worked for sending messages from his end, could he eventually find the League's headquarters? But those thoughts weren't at the forefront of his mind right now. All villains must be stopped by heroes. They hurt people, ruin lives, and destroy society for their own selfish gain. You think just because you're a hero and I'm a villain, you can act surprised when I do something normal? TC, you heroes really are stuck up, aren't you? Now get dressed before I do it myself. For goodness sake. Just open your mouth and let me see if you're even listening. Put this on and hurry up. You're my hero, Brat. You don't need to be selfish and go around saving others all the time. Izuku gripped the communicator tightly. He bit his lip, his heart pounding. He hated Shigaraki and everything he stood for, but there were aspects he couldn't bring himself to despise. The time he spent with Tomura wasn't all bad. No, Izuku even felt a flutter in his chest at times. He was scared of Tomura, no doubt, but there was a part of the villain that Izuku couldn't ignore, the part that helped him train for the festival, the part that carried him home after he got hurt, the part that risked his identity for Izuku's sake so he wouldn't be caught by Shoto with someone suspicious. There was a glimpse, small and barely noticeable, of a different side to the villain that Izuku believed no one else would ever see, but he did. Be selfish, do whatever you want and save yourself. You said to save myself. You said it was okay to be selfish. Do whatever I wanted. Izuku yelled into the communicator. He knew it was one-sided, but he poured his heart into it anyway. I saved myself. But I don't feel it at all. His eyes brimmed with tears. Why was he crying over a villain ignoring him? He wanted this. He had walked away with Shoto and never looked back. He had thrown the villain and the League away, and it felt like his life was returning to normal. Yet here he was, crying like a child. Not that crying was unusual for Izuku, but still. You said I was your hero, didn't you? Izuku leaned over, shouting into the communicator, his breath heavy as he paused to regain composure. His eyes widened at the weight of those words he had just shouted with all his might. And that's when Izuku Midoriya realized. I really like being with you. I like you. Chapter 25. I really enjoy being with you. I like you. Those words echoed through the communicator, creating a heavy silence in the air. The entire bar fell quiet. Earlier in the story, Tomura had given Izuku the impression that the communicator was a one-way device, allowing only Tomura to send messages. In truth, it worked both ways, but Tomura had lied to avoid dealing with Izuku trying to reach out. What? He what? Shouted twice, his expression shifting. It seems our boss has received a love confession. He told the others in a calmer tone afterward. All the villains were gathered around the communicator on the bar counter, where Tomura had left it before storming off in one of his moods, which had been escalating since he last saw Midoriya. When the walkie-talkie began to transmit a voice from the other side, the villains crowded around it like curious children. At first, they could only hear muffled sounds, but it quickly became clear who it was. When they heard those last few lines, their eyes widened, gasps escaping their lips. Yes, the League was eavesdropping on their boss's private conversation while he was absent. Even Dabi scoffed. I can't believe this. Tell me it's a joke. He sighed to himself, but Toga was too busy lamenting how she wished Izuku would confess to her as well. It seems the novice hero has fallen for my young master. How surprising. Kurogiri said calmly, as if he had anticipated this all along. He understood Tomura better than most, thanks to his mature demeanor and ability to manage Tomura's childishness. Oh please. You saw this coming, Dabi replied incredulously. No matter what any of us thinks, I believe it would be best if the hero told Master Tomura in person. Kurogiri said, picking up the communicator and pressing a few buttons. After a moment, he held it up, revealing a blinking red dot on the screen. What is that? Asked Twice. I sent Izuku Midoriya the coordinates of the bar. Don't worry. I believe Midoriya and Shigaraki are meant to cross paths. If that makes sense, Kurogiri explained, tucking the device into his vest pocket. Nobody is to inform the hero of what we know when he arrives. So Izuku is coming here. Then? Toga exclaimed, her face lighting up at the thought of seeing Midoriya. Kurogiri nodded. Indeed. I don't see why he wouldn't come here. After all, he knows he is still under Tomura's influence. And I believe all heroes have a curious nature. So. He adjusted his sleeves. Let us prepare for our arriving guest. After saying that, Izuku panted as if he had just run a marathon. He couldn't understand why his heart was racing like this. But as he processed everything, his face turned beet red, and he buried it in his hands. Why had he said that? Have I actually fallen for a villain? Izuku felt as if his mind might explode. He bit his thumbnail. No. I'm a hero. I can't feel this way. He muttered to himself, his usual habit intensifying. You're my hero, Brat. But Tomura's words echoed in Izuku's mind, sending a shiver down his spine and deepening his blush, causing him to curl up on the floor. He needed to regain his composure. You're my hero, Brat. Izuku shuddered again. It felt like his heart might burst. Was he a MSCST? No way. Tomura had insulted him with that line, so he couldn't see it as anything positive. He needed to stop acting like a schoolgirl with a crush. But why now? Why was he feeling this way? It must be the nerves. Yes, with the sports festival approaching, he was losing his mind, right? He thought so. Because Izuku had never felt this rush of emotions before. Was this what it was like to like someone? He had never had crushes before, so he didn't know. But if he was falling for this villain, especially the leader of the League of Villains, this couldn't be right. At least, he tried to convince himself of that. But as much as he wanted to hate Shigaraki, his heart wouldn't allow it. This feeling in my chest. Why did you put it here, Shigaraki? Izuku whispered to himself, holding the communicator close to his chest. But before he could dwell in silence with his thoughts, the device buzzed, nearly making Izuku jump out of his skin as he sat up, almost dropping the communicator. No way! Is he finally talking? Now! Izuku was terrified, but instead of an incoming call, he saw a location on his screen. He didn't recognize the address, but it was far away. He would need to take a train or bus to get there if he wanted to go. Why just a location though? Izuku pondered, staring at the device in his hands. Should he risk it? Of course not. Should he go? No way. That would be foolish. But why was he hesitating? He could just toss this piece of junk away and hope Tomura forgot about him. Izuku thought to himself. I was fine not seeing you anymore. Things were almost forgotten. He had Todoroki's help. Izuku could even tell All Might about what happened since the attack on the USJ. He had been stubborn before, wanting to protect his idol hero and feeling ashamed of being a failure as his successor, but he knew he needed help now. But if he went to wherever Tomura was trying to send him alone, he might be walking right into a trap. Midoriya always used his brain, but his heart wanted a say in this. He didn't want to risk whatever the villains could be planning and ruin his chance to stop this. But Izuku knew it was a lie as soon as he saved the coordinates on the GPS on his phone and left his apartment, leaving a note for his mom to let her know he wouldn't be home until late. Chapter 26. It was late and cold, so the subways weren't too crowded. In fact, there was hardly anyone on the train when Izuku boarded. When he got off, only a couple of drunken businessmen exited with him. He glanced down at his phone, which displayed a glowing red dot on the next block. Tomura wanted him to head toward the rougher part of town and, as Izuku discovered 5 minutes later, enter an old, suspicious-looking bar. He couldn't help but wonder if there was a pattern to villains favoring abandoned and creepy buildings. Speaking of which, he had noticed that the cafe he was forced to work in seemed to be out of business. The few customers it had didn't do much, and now it was completely empty. Izuku pondered why Tomura had gone to the trouble of setting up a base there and having him work there in the first place. Of course, it was Izuku's talent to overthink every detail and possibility, but he hadn't figured out the reasoning behind it yet. I should be careful. I might need to fight if Shigaraki is upset over me running away and ignoring his orders. I wouldn't be surprised if he tried to get rid of me like he threatened before. Izuku nodded to himself, took a deep breath, and chose a back entrance, avoiding the obvious route inside. He kept a careful eye out as he slowly entered the dark building. Inside, he couldn't spot anyone. Was he alone? Perhaps this was the wrong place? No, he checked his GPS again. This was the right location. As he walked around, Izuku entered a bar. Unlike everywhere else, it was clean. The counters were polished, and glittering dishware and glasses sat on display on the shelves. There were a few seats and small couches, all contributing to a chill vibe that resembled an old-fashioned jazz club. His curious gaze was interrupted when he sensed someone else walking in behind him, causing the hairs on the back of his neck to stand on end. Quickly, Izuku looked over his shoulder and stopped when he saw Tomura standing there. Shigaraki, why are we letting a UA student know our hideout location again? Dabi asked, his tone dripping with annoyance. Why was he and the other villains staying in the old cafe? Sure, it was a quick trip from the bar to here thanks to Kurogiri's quirk, but still. If they were just going to engage in reckless behavior that could get them caught by heroes, Dabi was not pleased. He was sure the others wouldn't be either. Master Tomura has been distracted. I'm afraid he's taking risky actions because of that student, Kurogiri explained. My master is one to have what he wants when he wants it. He wants Izuku Midoriya. He just doesn't know how or why yet. But sure. But your master was spotted in town that one time? What was he doing out and about anyway? I would think our so-called leader could wear a hoodie or mask to hide that ugly, crusty face of his, Dabi retorted. Kurogiri sighed slightly. If having a crush is going to make him put us all at risk, then you should do something about it. He listens to you more than us anyway, Dabi pointed out, irritation clear in his voice. True, Kurogiri agreed. That's why I have given my master what he wanted to keep him pleased. The other villains looked at Kurogiri with interest at those words. Like a child misbehaving, they won't calm down and think rationally until you give them the toy they want, Kurogiri continued, his tone darkening as a villainous smile crept across his face. So, I have been assisting in giving my master the toy he desired. Shigaraki, Izuku said, greeting the other, who seemed surprised, no, amazed and shocked that the green-haired male had made his way here. How the hell did you get here? Shigaraki seethed, stepping closer. Why are you here? It seemed Tomura was talking more to himself than to Izuku. But why now? Why was Izuku Midoriya here after what had happened? He thought this kid was smarter than that. Coming to the League of Villains hideout alone was reckless. Did he call for backup or have some sort of plan? Izuku opened his mouth to speak, but suddenly he was pushed against the wall, Tomura gripping his arm. He looked down at the shorter male. This close? No, Izuku would think about how this made him feel later. He maintained an expression of determination and looked up at Tomura. I came to talk to you. To beg me not to spill All Might's secret? No, but... Izuku tilted his head slightly. How do you know about that? I've tried asking before, but you never told me. I think now is a good time to know, he said firmly, keeping his courage evident. Tomura grumbled. My master told me about it. Not that it matters if you know. I'm going to deal with you now, he said casually, tightening his grip on Izuku's arm, causing the young hero to wince. Stop it, Shigaraki. Suddenly, Tomura paused. His grip loosened, surprising both him and Izuku. Tomura was astonished he had listened, but Izuku was mostly shocked with himself for using the nickname again. It wasn't like he had to anymore. They weren't in public, and he had told himself he refused to be a villain's pawn anymore. Then Tomura's expression darkened, and he glanced to the side. What the hell do you want anyway? He muttered, seeming to want Izuku to leave as soon as possible. I'm sick of seeing you now. Just go away, he muttered like a child throwing a small fit. Though now that they were closer, Izuku could smell something bitter. Tomura had the scent of alcohol on him. He had been drinking recently? Izuku should probably try harder not to upset him. Shigaraki, I wanted to ask you. But Izuku trailed off when Tomura stumbled forward, his forehead resting on Izuku's shoulder. The greenette froze, his eyes darting down to Tomura's blue head, then drifting down to his face. He looked as if he might be asleep. What was going on? Izuku assumed Tomura really was drunk. You brat, mumbled Tomura, sounding half asleep, his words slightly slurred with inaudible mutters. Leaving me again. I hate you. I hate you. Nobody is coming here for you. Tenko could remember the cold rain that night. And the strange man who approached him, offering a hand to take. Even though people were terrified of touching the small child, this man didn't fear him? Tenko's dazed eyes drifted from his palms up to the stranger. But was nobody really coming? Not even that other boy who promised to return? Tenko had been waiting in the same spot since they met for over 2 weeks now. He didn't know that the reason Izuku never came back was that Izuku had recently learned he didn't have a quirk and was too heartbroken to even leave his room. Nobody? Tenko asked in a scratched voice. The man nodded and smiled sadly. No one will come for you. No heroes, no bystanders, no one. Heroes don't save the ones like us, the man told him. You don't have a hero, child. Izuku's eyes widened with confusion. Again? What did Tomura mean by that? Izuku couldn't think of anything off the top of his head. But before he could even try to ask the villain about it, Tomura began to snore quietly, almost nasally, but softly, like a small child who had fallen asleep peacefully in Izuku's arms. Shigaraki. Izuku hesitated, then placed his hand on Tomura's head, smoothing out the tangled sky-blue locks. It wasn't that Izuku couldn't support the taller boy's weight, he was shorter, but in physical strength, Izuku had the advantage. He carefully kept an eye on Tomura's hands. The villain's arms hung limply to either side of his body. His fingers were perfectly straight, as if he was so used to being careful with them that they stayed stiff like that daily. I want to never forgive you for putting these feelings in me. But I can't hate you. Izuku quietly spoke to himself, then pulled something out of his back pocket. He gently picked up one of Tomura's hands and slipped on a glove. The glove had a spot cut for the pinky and thumb, made of thin, manageable material. Izuku had make them a while back from a design he came up with. He planned to use them when the day came that he would have to confront Tomura, but it turned out they ended up being a gift anyway, despite Izuku lying to Mei at the time to avoid raising her suspicions. Izuku put both gloves on Tomura, and now that it was safer to do so, he picked him up, cradling the lanky, tall boy in his arms. Maybe he could put him on one of those couches until he woke up? But when would that be? Izuku promised his mom he would be back not too late. He didn't want to worry her any more than he already had. But Izuku wanted to talk to Tomura. "Hey you," called out a voice nearby. Izuku jumped, startled, but saw you standing by a doorway that led to another part of the building. The blonde-headed boy gestured for Izuku to follow. "The staircase. The room at the end is his. Don't stay down here," he whispered, glancing at a TV-like screen in the corner of the room before looking back at Izuku. "Thanks to you, the small boy Izuku had saved well, actually thanks to a mission of Tomura's, but only because this kid was apparently talented and part of the league. He showed Izuku where to put Tomura, which Izuku appreciated. The room that belonged to Tomura was empty, with nothing but an almost bare bed, a few shelves, and a table. "He doesn't have much," Izuku commented as he looked around the room after laying Tomura in bed. You nodded as if he already knew. "Tomokuin doesn't keep too much. He'll just destroy it anyway," he shrugged. "Anyway, let me see that," he said, snatching the communicator from Izuku's back pocket. "But you got it all scruffed up," he mumbled with annoyance. Izuku stared at him for a moment, then gasped. "But Yukuin, did you make the communicators?" "Emchim. That's amazing. At your age. Think you would get along with someone at my school." Izuku mumbled to himself, thinking about Mei. "But then you left, saying something about cleaning up the device and exiting the room." Izuku nodded slightly, indicating he heard, then walked around the room a bit, looking around with curiosity. Not that there was much to see. All the wall shelves on one side of the room were empty except for layers of dust. However, Izuku noticed something on one of the shelves. What was it? A haichu wrapper. Izuku wondered aloud, definitely confused. Well, it was just trash, right? Maybe it had been there before the league even arrived, but green apple. Izuku used to love this flavor when he was younger. When was the last time he had them? It was a day when his mother got him some before dropping him off to play at the playground. Izuku drifted off into thought, reminiscing about the last day he could remember having these same ones, until he heard you call for him from another room. Izuku put the wrapper back on the shelf and called back that he would be right there. Chapter 27. After putting the random haichu wrapper he found back on the shelf, Izuku was walking around and past Tomura's bed, where he thought a sleeping figure lay, until Tomura suddenly grabbed Izuku's wrist, causing the greenette to flinch in surprise. He honestly thought Tomura was asleep, but the villain awoke with a groggy look on his face. Izuku swallowed and smiled nervously. I was just leaving." He really didn't know how Tomura would react to seeing him in his room, but he didn't want to find out. When did you get here?" Tomura muttered, his grip on Izuku's wrist still firm as he sat up. He seemed a little more alert now. Hopefully, anyway. Dealing with a drinking villain didn't sound like much fun. Izuku was a bit surprised. "Oh, you don't remember? I got here earlier because..." But he didn't get a chance to explain or ask about the location he was sent through the communicators because Tomura tugged on his arm. In slow motion, Izuku lost his balance and fell forward, landing on the bed with his chest against Tomura's lap. Immediately, Izuku's stomach began to flip and his heart raced. His face was buried in the gray and black comforter, which carried Tomura's scent. It was almost overwhelming. "That's right. You were sneaking around my hideout." Tomura growled, his tone sluggish, causing Izuku to squeak and stammer some sort of excuse. Maybe Tomura wasn't too sober after all, or perhaps he was just annoyed, most likely the latter. Izuku sat up and tried to get off the bed, but Shigaraki wouldn't let go of him. His grip was tight, and Izuku wondered if he tried to escape, would Tomura get more upset? Tomura seemed less careful with his words now. Izuku was sure that if Tomura hadn't been drinking, he would never have so easily revealed that All for One was the one who told him about One for All. Still, the hero tried to coax Tomura into letting him go. It felt like Izuku's wrist might snap otherwise. I wasn't. You liar. I swear. Suddenly, Izuku cut himself off with a gasp when Tomura placed a hand on his cheek. Tomura's skin felt cool against him, and Izuku didn't feel nervous touching him this time because of the gloves he had put on Tomura earlier. He wasn't scared. Their eyes seemed unable to tear away from each other for what felt like an eternity. Izuku was mesmerized by the vivid crimson orbs that seemed to draw him in like magnets. They were so close. Izuku could feel Tomura's breath against his face. That strange feeling he had experienced before when changing clothes in front of Tomura, when they went to the ice cream shop, when Tomura had given him his hoodie to wear, and even when he confessed to an empty communicator words Tomura may never know of, spread from Izuku's heart to his entire body this time. It felt light and fluttery, like he was soaring on clouds. Was this feeling okay? Should Izuku move away? Their faces were getting so close now. Izuku was sure that if he didn't move away, there wouldn't be a gap between them anymore. Tomura's scent enveloped Izuku's senses. He could hear his own quick breathing, his mouth felt dry, his body felt tingly, everything was moving so fast, yet it felt like time had slowed down. Tomura's other hand traveled up Izuku's back, making him shudder as he felt his body responding instead of his mind. He could feel the heat rise to his face, his neck and ears were warm. I missed you, Tomura muttered, making Izuku almost do a double take. The villain whispered those words in his ear, making Izuku almost forget who was speaking because of what he said and how he said it. Was this the same Tomura Shigaraki he knew? He seemed so gentle and quiet, instead of fussy and demanding. It was a side Izuku had never seen. Did Tomura really miss him since the last time they had seen each other? Tomura. Izuku tried to speak, but was cut off by Tomura's, "Shut up," as he looked him dead in the eye again, making Izuku freeze hypnotized. He found himself leaning into Tomura's touch, his hands gripping the front of Tomura's hoodie, and then he felt Tomura's cracked lips against his, kissing the villain Tomura Shigaraki. Oh. So that's what this is. Izuku was gently pushed onto his back as their lips remained locked. Tomura's hand traveled down Izuku's side. This feeling. What I've felt. The hero felt his eyelids grow heavy, the villain's dry fingertips tracing over Izuku's shirt, making his breath hitch. His eyes cracked open as he gazed at Tomura, who wore a look not of anger but of something deeper. Their kiss didn't break yet, but continued. Just for tonight, they could forget everything else, that they were villain and hero, and only think of this moment and one another. It was love. The morning sunlight filtered through the worn-out curtains, gently warming Izuku Midoriya's face and prompting a soft hum as he shifted in his sleep. Outside, the sounds of cars heading to work and school filled the air, but within the room, everything remained quiet and peaceful. The warmth was the first thing Izuku noticed, and he instinctively gripped the blanket, pulling it closer. He didn't want to get up. He felt content and wished to stay in this moment. But then he realized he wasn't alone. Izuku was cuddled up against someone. His green eyes widened, and a light pink hue crept onto his cheeks as he recognized the peaceful expression of Tomura Shigaraki beside him. What had happened? Izuku mentally panicked, the events of the previous night, swirling in his mind like a blur. He couldn't recall the details clearly, but he had a sinking feeling about it. His face flushed deeper as he noticed the absence of his clothes and the faint stings on his neck, evidence of tender bruises trailing down his chest and stomach. He quickly pulled the blanket back over himself. Tentatively, Izuku's gaze returned to the villain, who appeared calm and even somewhat endearing in his sleep. Tomura was not complaining or scowling, he seemed entirely at peace. Izuku brushed a stray hair from his face, realizing how close they were. Just then, Tomura's eyes fluttered open, locking onto Izuku's with an intensity that made him feel exposed. The villain remained silent, as if waiting for Izuku to speak first, which was a daunting task given his current state of mind. Izuku stammered, struggling to find his words. Tomura reached over, brushing some hair away from Izuku's face, and the warmth of his touch was oddly unsettling. "Stop looking at me like that," Tomura snapped, though he loosened his grip, glancing up at the ceiling. "Why are you in my bed?" he asked bluntly, making Izuku feel as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over him. You don't remember? Izuku's heart raced. He recalled everything, but what could he say? Tomura's expression shifted, and he leaned closer, his tone sharp. I remember that. Just why are you still here? Are you foolish? Izuku felt a rush of embarrassment. Why had he, a hero in training, put himself in such a risky situation? Tomura was right. If any of the other villains discovered him here, he could be in serious trouble. Yet, unbeknownst to Tomura, the rest of the League of Villains was already aware of their situation. Hey, you invited me here. You were just too drunk to remember. Izuku retorted, but Tomura groaned in response. I never invited you. I have no idea what you're talking about. Izuku sighed, deciding to chalk it up to Tomura's drunken state. But reality began to settle in, and he felt a wave of confusion wash over him. What had he done? With whom? Was he still a hero in training? He was supposed to be All Might's successor, destined to become number one. How could he reconcile that with his feelings for a villain? Tears began to well in his eyes as he grappled with his emotions. Suddenly, he found himself crying, much to Tomura's surprise. You know, for someone chosen to replace All Might, you sure cry a lot, Tomura remarked, resting his chin on the top of Izuku's head. I remember seeing you cry like this once when you were younger. It was a while back. Izuku's tears paused as he looked up, curiosity piqued. When? I don't know. I was 11 or 12. You were at a playground, crying because some friend of yours was picking on you. It was super annoying. Izuku chuckled softly, wiping his eyes. Why yeah, that sounds like me. It was likely Bakugo who had upset him back then. But did you really know me when we were younger? He was cut off by Tomura placing a hand over his mouth. Did you put these gloves on me while I was sleeping? Tomura asked, and Izuku nodded. Tomura huffed, admitting to himself that the gloves weren't too bad. They were made of sturdy material and could be easily removed, not touching all of Tomura's fingers, which prevented them from disintegrating. Izuku gently pulled Tomura's hand away. I put them on last night after you passed out. You drank too much, he said bluntly, earning a shocked look from Tomura, who then blushed and scowled. Tell anyone, and I'll make you regret it. All right, I won't. Then Izuku realized he had stopped crying. He looked up at Tomura, wondering if the villain had done something to distract him from his worries. A small smile crept onto his face at the thought. Also, Tomura added, eager to change the subject. He didn't want Izuku to question why he had been drinking in the first place. I was going to come to that sports festival thing. Just to watch. Izuku froze. That was far too dangerous. Surely security would be heightened after the attack on the USJ. And the leader just walked into an area full of heroes, professional heroes on guard that was like stepping into a lion's den. Izuku immediately shook his head. You can't. You'll be caught and… Tomura leaned in closer, a smirk on his face. I just want to see you perform at the end. I hope you can make it that far. After all, he sat up, casually resting a leg over Izuku's thigh as he leaned down, his tangled blue hair brushing against Izuku's face. Now there's nothing you can do. At this point, you're mine now, Izuku Midoriya. When Izuku finally managed to escape Tomura's grasp, he had a lot of explaining to do to his worried mother, who had been anxious since he had been gone all night without any contact. Izuku understood how much his absence affected her, especially after being kidnapped so early in the school year. To ease her worries, he concocted a story about training all night, feeling guilty for lying to someone who cared for him so deeply. He couldn't help but wonder how she would react if she knew the truth that he had been blackmailed and had developed feelings for Tomura Shigaraki. Would she still love him? He believed she would, but he feared she might lose trust in him. The thought of disappointing her weighed heavily on his heart, knowing his life had become an unexpected mess. Yet, it was that very chaos that made Izuku's heart race. On the day of the festival, Izuku was a bundle of nerves. His palms were sweaty, his body trembled with anxiety, and he muttered to himself as he reviewed his hero notes, searching for any ideas or information he might need. The only thing that calmed him was the thought of Tomura watching him, which filled him with both excitement and dread. Would Tomura, a villain, really risk coming to UA's sports festival just to see him perform? It made Izuku feel special, knowing Tomura was willing to put himself in danger for him. As the festival began, the first event was a race that all the students participated in. While waiting in their starting positions, Izuku glanced around, hoping to catch a glimpse of Tomura. He didn't see him, but he figured if Tomura was there, he would be watching from a safe distance. Ugh, where is he? Tomura muttered to himself, peering through binoculars. He had a radio piece in his ear, communicating with Kurogiri, who had helped him infiltrate the school. Sir, I can't see what you're looking at, Kurogiri replied. Perhaps you should. Shut up. I don't need your help, Tomura snapped, turning off the radio and tossing it aside, stepping on it in frustration. Deep down, he felt a mix of embarrassment and pride for being there, wanting to see Izuku without admitting it. Finally, he spotted the familiar green hair, and a small smile tugged at his lips. Midoriya, called Todoroki, who stood beside Izuku as they lined up for the race. He had something to say. I hope you give it your all. I'm planning on winning today. Izuku was taken aback but quickly responded with determination. I'm not planning on losing either, Todoroki-kun. Let's do our best. Todoroki nodded, looking ahead as the announcer, Midnight, began the countdown. Izuku took a deep breath, knowing he had to win not just for himself, but for his friends, his mother, and even for Tomura. When the word, go, echoed through the air, Izuku sprinted forward without hesitation, racing alongside his classmates. Today was the day he could prove to himself that he was still a hero, despite the complicated feelings in his heart. However, unbeknownst to him, that dream was about to face a serious challenge. Throughout the race and the other challenges, Tomura observed carefully from his vantage point in the stadium. He had chosen a higher, less crowded area, leaning against the railing with his hoodie pulled down, peering through binoculars. He might have appeared a bit suspicious, but he attracted no attention, and that suited him just fine at least for the moment. In the background, laughter erupted from a group of girls. Oh my God! Are you serious? One of them giggled. Do you think he's a pro? No way. Too creepy. Their drunken giggles filled the air, but Tomura was too focused on the intense battle between Izuku and Shoto to pay them any mind. Izuku was urging Shoto to unleash his full power, a plea that only irritated Tomura. Why would he help his opponent? It must be a hero thing. Todoroki, just come at me with everything you have. You promised we would try our best. Izuku shouted, his hands bruised and bloodied as he braced himself against an incoming ice attack. Just talk to him. A girl nudged her friend toward Tomura. When someone bumped against him, he lowered his binoculars and turned to see what was happening. He groaned quietly, he wasn't in the mood for interaction. Get lost. I'm busy, he snapped, but the girl grabbed his arm and tugged him to follow her. Whoa. You're totally creepy, she laughed, noticing his expression. Yet she hugged his arm anyway. Come with us. Isn't watching some kids duel kind of boring? Her hands reached for Tomura's right hand, pulling him along. Tomura's eyes widened in disgust. Let me go. By now, onlookers had started to take notice of the commotion. She continued to tug at his hand, and without either of them realizing, his glove began to slip off. Just come with. Tomura yanked his hand free, leaving her holding only his glove. In a swift motion, he pushed her away, causing her to stumble back against the railing. It all happened so quickly that he didn't immediately register the consequences. Wah-wah. The girl looked down in horror as her body began to change, a grayness creeping over her skin. Why? She gasped, losing her balance and toppling over the railing, plummeting to the ground below. Cheers turned to screams as the crowd witnessed the shocking fall. Tomura's glove lay abandoned on the ground next to the remnants of what had just happened. As the stadium erupted in chaos, Izuku and Shoto froze mid-battle, their attention drawn to the commotion. Izuku's heart sank as he realized the gravity of the situation, and the horror was caught live on television. Someone has just fallen from the stands. Present Mike shouted in shock, leaping from his seat. Aizawa, looking like a figure wrapped in bandages, rushed out to assist, with Mike following closely behind. Izuku couldn't see who was responsible for the incident, but the sight of the girl vanishing into dust filled him with dread. His heart dropped when the cameras panned to Tomura, his face displayed on all the screens in the stadium. He stood frozen, his arms still extended. Why couldn't he move? Everything had spiraled out of control, and he couldn't reach Kurogiri without the radio piece. Tomura had broken in a fit of rage. It's the leader of the League of Villains. All Might and Aizawa shouted in unison, and the realization hit everyone present. The truth was out. Tomura Shigaraki was there. Tomura Shigaraki was spotted at the sports festival. Those were words nobody expected to hear. Immediate panic filled the stadium, and the pro-heroes sprang into action, ready to protect the civilians and students from the villain. With everything broadcasted live, parents and families grew increasingly worried for their children participating in the festival, including Izuku's mother. At first, she was confused about why Murasan was the one she saw on TV. Tomura Shigaraki? The man who had brought so much darkness into her son's life? That Tomura was the one she had welcomed into her home, close to Izuku, without knowing his true identity? Did Izuku know? Why hadn't he said anything? It seemed Tomura had made Izuku keep quiet for some reason, and whatever it was, it couldn't be good. Did Murasan trick them both, and now he was there with her son, where he could get hurt again? Oh God! Not again! She crumbled to the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks. Run, Izuku! She sobbed, desperately trying to call Izuku's phone to reach him. She had to make sure he was okay. She needed to tell him to get away. However, Izuku never answered the phone because he had left his phone with his belongings back in the break room. Inko wasn't thinking clearly and kept calling him non-stop while she watched the television, just like everyone else in the world witnessing the shocking turn of events at the sports festival. Tomura! Izuku took a moment to gather himself before snapping out of it. He ran past Todoroki and off the field. He had to reach Tomura before anyone got hurt. Izuku wasn't sure what he would do, but his feet moved before he could think. He saw someone in trouble, and that was all that mattered. Izuku Midoriya. Todoroki froze as he watched Izuku's figure disappear off the field. The green net had left him without a word, presumably to join the villain. I guess. You really do care about him. Todoroki clenched his fists, staring at the ground. Their battle had felt like the beginning of something meaningful, yet now he felt a pang of disappointment watching. Izuku leave him? What had compelled Izuku to follow the villain? What had Tomura done to him? And how could Todoroki save Izuku from Shigaraki? Perhaps there was nothing he could do. In it, Tomura muttered, stepping back and turning to run away from the stands. He noticed a staircase leading up to the roof of the stadium, a large dome overlooking the entire area. It was a risky choice, but he couldn't go downstairs where the heroes would be. He would be in serious trouble if All Might showed up, though All Might had exhausted his energy and couldn't help at that moment. No doubt the other villains were watching the sports festival on TV, particularly his master, and if Tomura got into trouble he would surely send Kurogiri to help. So, Tomura needed to wait for backup. He made his way upstairs, hearing the screams and unsettled cries of the fans in the stadium, along with heroes shouting to calm everyone down. As a worker approached, Tomura pushed him aside, causing the man to stumble. Tomura felt a surge of panic and annoyance as he scratched at his neck. This wasn't supposed to happen. This isn't what I wanted. He always got angry when things went awry. Stupid society. They always blame the bad guys first. It wasn't like he meant to hurt anyone. It wasn't like he chose to be hated by the world. Spotting a trapdoor in the ceiling, he pushed it open. A gust of air hit his face, causing his hoodie to slip off. Kurogiri would need to know his location to teleport, so this was better than being inside a building he had never been in before. Tomura stood up and shut the trapdoor. There wasn't much he could do. He looked around. The roof sloped downwards. One wrong move, and he could fall to his demise. How ironic that would be after what had happened to that other girl. Hurry up, Kurogiri. Tomura muttered to himself, continuing to scratch until he drew blood. He paused when the trapdoor suddenly opened, instinctively reaching out to confront whoever had caught him. But his hand froze midair when he saw Izuku's worried face, mere inches away from his trembling hand. Tomura! Izuku panted, climbing onto the roof and slamming the door shut behind him. "I thought you might come up here." It was as if Izuku knew how to think like Tomura. For a moment, Tomura's expression softened, but then he felt anger at Izuku for following him. "You idiot! Why did you come after me? I couldn't just stay behind." Izuku shot back. "They'll get suspicious if they see us together and not fighting. They'll think you're a villain. Let them." Tomura was left speechless. Izuku was crying, which was no surprise. He pushed Tomura's ungloved hand away and grabbed his forearm, pulling Tomura's gloved hand to his chest. I'm not a villain because I'm here. I'm not a villain for following my heart. For my feelings." He clenched his jaw, taking a sharp breath, looking up at Tomura with tear-filled eyes. "I'm not a villain because I love you." Tears streamed down Izuku's freckled cheeks as he gazed at the villain. Everything felt chaotic, but why wouldn't it be? Love was never simple or easy. "Izuku." Tomura used Izuku's first name for the first time, his tone calm. Was he truly loved? By this hero willing to defy the title of hero and embrace the label of villain? For him? But before either could say another word, something tightened around Tomura's throat, pulling him away from Izuku and toward the edge of the roof. Tomura gasped as he struggled against the white scarf, his back scraping against the roof, tearing at his clothes and leaving marks on his skin. He felt the pressure building as he was pulled down, tossed from side to side. Aizawa, still recovering from the earlier attack at the USJ, was using all his strength to subdue Tomura, fueled by the desire to confront the villain who had injured him before. Aizawa stood behind Izuku, manipulating his scarf to keep Tomura off balance. He was using his quirk, but it was a challenge to maintain control. "Midoriya, get back," he urged, his voice strained. "I'll handle this." With a swift motion, he threw Tomura forward, then pulled him back, slamming him into the ground. Aizawa knew he had to act quickly. He couldn't let Tomura regain his strength or hurt his student again. Izuku hesitated, feeling torn as he watched Aizawa confront Tomura. "I'm sorry, Aizawa-sensei. Forgive me for this," he murmured, preparing to unleash a wave of force aimed at Aizawa, hoping to create a moment of distraction. He calculated that Tomura, still entangled in the scarf, wouldn't fall off the edge. However, at that moment, Aizawa's quirk faltered, and Tomura seized the opportunity to break free from the scarf's grip. In an instant, as Izuku's force struck both Aizawa and Tomura, the villain was no longer restrained and began to fall from the roof. Time seemed to slow as Tomura realized the gravity of his situation. Weak and battered, he could barely keep his eyes open, the effects of Aizawa's earlier attack weighing heavily on him. Suddenly, he felt a hand grasp his own. Izuku had rushed forward without hesitation. "No." Tomura's eyes widened in disbelief as he saw Izuku's skin begin to crack under the strain. Hold on." Izuku's fingers were already injured, and as he grasped Tomura's hand, he felt an overwhelming pain coursing through him. "Let me go." Tomura shouted, desperately trying to pull away, fearing for Izuku's safety. The camera crew captured the intense scene unfolding on the rooftop. Aizawa battling Tomura, Izuku intervening to save the villain, risking his own well-being. "Izuku!" Tomura's mind raced back to painful memories, recalling the last time he had unintentionally harmed someone with his quirk. "I'm begging. Let me go." Despite the pain and fear, Izuku managed to offer Tomura a weak smile. "I'm here. To save you." "Tomura." He held on tightly, but in a flash his grip faltered, and Tomura began to fall. Dust swirled around him as he plummeted, but just then, Kurojire's portal opened, catching Tomura and whisking him away from sight. Chapter 31. The sports festival continued to dominate the news even after it had ended. The fact that Tomura Shigaraki had been present and was rescued by a student made headlines everywhere. Newspapers and articles detailed every aspect of the event, sparking a wave of gossip and speculation. People began to question UA, and what was meant to be a moment of public trust only deepened the turmoil. Nothing would be the same, especially for Tomura and Izuku. Yet, Tomura remained largely unaware of the chaos outside. He kept himself away from the television and news, as it only served to upset him. After Tomura fell from the stadium, Kurojiri had transported him back to headquarters, expressing deep regret for arriving too late, explaining that it had been nearly impossible to get through with all the pro-heroes around. But Tomura didn't blame Kurojiri. The only one he held responsible was himself. In the days following the festival, Tomura isolated himself in his room, neglecting food and sleep. He stared at his hands, feeling the weight of his actions. These cursed hands. How much longer would he continue to destroy everything and everyone he cared about? He thought he had escaped the cycle of pain that had plagued him with his father, but it seemed history was repeating itself. Had he truly harmed Izuku, the only person who genuinely cared for him? During those days of solitude, Tomura refused to speak to any of the other villains. He curled up in the corner of his dark room, the only light coming from the dim glow of his computer screen. His hair was unkempt, and he wore the same clothes from the sports festival. But my quirk took him away from me. Tomura hissed through clenched teeth, frustration boiling within him. Everything felt unbearable. This turmoil had begun with his confusing feelings for Izuku. It had been Tomura's plan to kidnap Izuku at USJ, to see the boy who had made a promise to him. It was his idea to fabricate a story about his master wanting something from Nizu to justify needing Izuku. And it was Tomura's fault that he had been caught and had touched Izuku. After everything they had been through, Tomura had believed they would both be okay. He had been so careful hiding his plans from his master, making Izuku work at a cafe just to keep an eye on him without all for one knowing. If his master had discovered Izuku, Tomura feared what might have happened, and he would have been powerless to stop it. He had worked tirelessly behind the scenes to keep Izuku safe. But now, he felt he had ruined everything. What could he do at this point? Without Izuku's smile, his kind heart, his voice, Tomura didn't know how he could go on. Maybe, he thought, staring at his trembling hands as he slowly reached for his neck. I should just quit this game. His palms brushed against his skin, fingers curling slightly. Without my favorite player, I don't want to play anymore. His fingertips drew closer, and he thought it might be better to end it all. He felt as if he had destroyed the innocence of a potential hero who had a bright future ahead of him. If Tomura had never entered Izuku's life, he would be in school, attending classes, and saving lives. And unlike Izuku, Tomura felt he was only capable of taking lives. So I should just... His fingertips inched closer. I should die. But just as his fingertips were about to make contact, someone suddenly pulled his hands away. Tomura was caught off guard, unable to react as he was enveloped in a hug. It's okay now, a voice quickly assured him, holding him tightly. Tomura's eyes widened as he realized it was Izuku. Brat? He murmured, his body frozen in place. Izuku's eyes were filled with tears, and he began to cry almost immediately. I'm all right. See? He promised, holding Tomura close, his heart breaking at the sight. It's going to be all right, he whispered, sniffling. After a moment, Tomura pulled back slightly, biting his lip as warmth spread across his cheeks. Get out of my sight, he muttered, though he made no move to distance himself from Izuku. Don't say that. Go away. It's going to be okay now. I hate you. Yet, even as sharp and cold as Tomura's words sounded, Izuku didn't flinch. He reached up, cupping Tomura's cheek gently, using his thumb to wipe away Tomura's tears. I hate you. Tomura stammered, his shoulders shaking as he tried to avert his gaze, both knowing he was crying. It only hurt more to see Izuku with only one hand now. I hate you, he cried, leaning against Izuku's chest. The greenette smiled sadly, using his hand to softly brush and pat Tomura's head as he cried. They remained there for a while. Tomura had no idea how many tears he had been holding back, but they all broke free at once. Izuku didn't push Tomura away. They stayed together, crying and comforting one another, sharing their pain. After Kurojiri observed for a moment through the slightly open door, he closed it and sighed with relief. I suppose we owe Izuku Midoriya our eternal gratitude for saving my young master. I'm glad I brought him here, he murmured to himself before heading back downstairs, allowing the two the privacy they needed. Final chapter. Izuku Midoriya, a student from the prestigious UA Academy, had gone missing shortly after the sports festival. During the event, he was seen on live television assisting a villain's escape and even confronting his homeroom teacher and pro-hero, Shota Aizawa. Rumors circulated that Midoriya was facing expulsion, but he vanished before any confirmation could be made. The woman on the television was abruptly silenced when Tomura kicked it, sending it crashing against the concrete wall. He was tired of hearing the same old news. It seemed the world couldn't fathom that a student and aspiring hero had fallen into villainy. At least, that's how it appeared to the public. The hero community was under scrutiny, and the gossip surrounding Izuku Midoriya's association with Tomura Shigaraki was relentless. Neither of them had time to indulge in such nonsense. What a load of nonsense. Seriously, is the public really that self-absorbed? Tomura muttered, glaring at the broken, flickering screen before turning to glance at the sleeping figure on the couch. While staying in a rundown motel in a rough part of town wasn't ideal, neither Tomura nor Izuku seemed to mind much. They had sacrificed everything to be together, and there was no turning back now. Tomura had fled from his master, while Izuku had left his friends and home behind. Initially, Izuku tried to wait for the situation to settle, but his mother was in such shock over his injury and circumstances that she fell into a state of stress-induced coma and was moved to a hospital downtown. After that, Izuku ran away to find Tomura, who was on the brink of despair before Izuku intervened. It was in that moment that Izuku realized they needed each other. Tomura was all he had left, and returning to his old life was not an option. He couldn't be both a hero and a villain. He had to choose one path, and he chose the latter. Deep down, he may never truly embrace villainy, but he had to accept society's perception of him. Perhaps the world decides how it sees individuals. Izuku, Tomura whispered softly, crouching beside the couch and gently shaking Izuku's shoulder. But the green-haired boy was too deeply asleep to stir. Dark circles under his eyes and pale skin revealed his exhaustion. Life seemed to be draining from him, and Tomura hated it. Tenderly, Tomura brushed a few strands of Izuku's hair behind his ear, admiring his beautiful face, which belonged to the person he loved. I'll change this society. This broken, cruel society that does this to people like us, the villain vowed, taking Izuku's hand and holding it close to his heart. His gaze lingered on Izuku's bandaged wrist, a reminder of the sacrifice he had made to save Tomura's life. I'll destroy it all. So we can rebuild, he declared, his voice filled with determination. Tomura's eyes burned with anger as he contemplated the state of the world, how unjust and divided it was. He refused to let someone like Izuku Midoriya, who had done nothing wrong, be cast aside by society. Tomura bit his cracked lip, feeling the sting of dryness. He leaned closer, taking a moment to admire Izuku. He would protect him, keeping him safe from the tainted world that sought to harm him. If Izuku were caught, he could face serious consequences for aiding Tomura during the festival. But Tomura would never allow that to happen. He wouldn't let Izuku suffer for his choices. He squeezed Izuku's hand and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead, leaving a faint mark against his skin. As he pulled away, his half-lidded eyes remained fixed on Izuku, the person he would do anything for. From that moment on, his life belonged to Izuku, and he would protect him, even if it meant sacrificing everything. He caressed Izuku's cheek, listening as he shifted and murmured in his sleep, so innocent and untouched by the world's cruelty. Tomura held Izuku's hand to his lips, speaking in a soft, breathless tone. From now on, I'm your villain, Brat.